Meeting of the Town Council on December 15th. We will take roll call. Sharon?
Councilmember Alves?
Here.
Councilmember Warnikoff?
Here.
Councilmember Richards?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hughes?
Here.
Mayor Derwin?
Here. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, so today we're going to conduct interviews for 3 seats on the ASCC and 3 seats on the Planning Commission. First, we will interview for the ASCC. The Architectural Site Control Commission meets on the second and the fourth Mondays at 4 p.m. Typically, there are also site visits for staff and commissioners. Today, when we conduct our interviews, each candidate will have an opportunity to introduce themselves and explain why they are running. Council members will have an opportunity to ask 1 question of each candidate with follow-up as needed. After all the candidates have been interviewed, I will allow the public to comment by using the raise hand button. However, if there are a lot of hands raised, and I can't tell right now how many participants there are, I don't think there are a lot, but just in case we get like 100 people who show up and everyone wants to raise their hand, then I would reserve the right to limit comments to 1 minute to keep us on schedule. The council will have a few moments to make their choices, and then a voice vote will be taken by Town Clerk Sharon Hanlon. The appointees will be announced, and at that time, all candidates are free to leave or stay, and we will move on to the Planning Commission interviews. So let's get started. Our first ASCC candidate is Kenny Chung.
I just let Kenny in, so it probably takes him a second to connect to audio. Hi, Kenny, it's Jeremy. How are you? You're on mute, I think.
Sorry about that. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Kenny, are you the one down there with the 650-678-7562 number?
No, I'm connected.
Oh, there you are.
Right now.
I see you, Kenny. Great, thank you.
I see him, yeah.
All righty, so we're going to start with a question from each council member, and I am going to ask John Richards to go first. Did you hear me, John?
Sorry, no, I didn't. I was distracted for a second there. You want me to start?
I was going to ask you to go first, but if you'd prefer not to.
Oh, that's fine. That's no problem. Yeah. Okay. Kenny, good to meet you. Welcome, and thank you for applying for this position. My question would be neighborhood character. It's a major consideration when we're evaluating new projects. So what are the elements of neighborhood character that you feel are most important?
I think probably the number one most important element of neighborhood character is cohesiveness. So for the individual neighborhoods, I think one of the beautiful things about Portola Valley is there's actually a bit of diversity between the different neighborhoods. And so from the ASCC's standpoint, the way that cohesiveness really can be evaluated is by getting an understanding of what the other neighbors in the neighborhood think. And I understand that there are ways that they can make their opinions known and so on. And it's sort of the process facilitates getting input from the other neighbors. And I think that's really key is understanding for the people who are a part of the community what kind of feedback they can give as to how they feel any new project can fit in or not. And then I think a lot of the other key parts of this can be functionalized through that. And so there are aspects such as sight lines, which can be very important to the character of certain communities. Obviously, if you're in the woods, there are certain kinds of things that you have to take into account with regard to sight lines versus if you're in a place like PV Ranch. And so there are things that you wouldn't consider in either based on the site conditions. Is that a sufficient answer? I'm not sure how many questions that we have for the amount of time, so I'm not sure how much to elaborate.
Yeah, as I understand, we're each going to ask one question of each.
And I'm sorry, Kenny, I should have asked you in the beginning to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running. You know, like a minute or two.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, thank you. So, well, my name is Kenny Chung. I've been in Portola Valley for 2 years. I've been in the Bay Area for 7 years. And that entire time working for NASA Ames Research Center as a research scientist, doing materials and manufacturing research. As a civil servant, and which carries with it a fair amount of administrative duties with regard to contracts related to your expertise. Across the agency. So I feel that I bring a certain experience with regard to what it means to be helping various stakeholders to come together in a situation where there are things that can be seen as regulations, and there are things outside of regulations that can be a cause for conflict. And something I've learned in this process, in the processes that I have to deal with at work, is that usually it's possible to facilitate enough communication that there can be a consensus. I think that's usually the case. And then where that's not the case, I believe that you have to be very careful about what's actually enforceable and what's regulation. And sometimes the so-called regulator has to take a step back, and sometimes the entity applying for permission to do something outside the box has to take a step back. Prior to my career as a scientist and administrator, I have a professional design degree. I practiced for short periods of time on commercial and residential projects of various scales. And I have a fairly strong sense of aesthetic and appreciation for the diversity of different ways of designing. But the key thing that I think I would bring to the ASCC out of all of that experience is not that I feel like I would like to help design everybody's projects. I don't think that's the right approach. But it's that I can very quickly understand a set of technical and aesthetically focused drawings to really get to what is trying to be proposed, trying to be portrayed, and what the relationship between that is to what is actually going to happen if you implement what's shown in a set of technical drawings or photo simulations. And I think there's a key distinction right there. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Kenny. Jeff, would you like to ask Kenny a question, please?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, Kenny. One thing, my question is, and you've probably encountered similar situations in your previous work. One of the challenges of ASCC is you're constantly sort of balancing the desires and the rights of an applicant with the desires and rights of the people around them. That's sort of one of the primary kind of frontiers of tension and conflict in this. I'm curious if there's an example of something where you sort of feel like you've had to, balance those kinds of different desires between two groups who had their own sort of claims and rights in a situation, and how that might inform you making decisions when you look at somebody's application here in town versus what their neighbors would like to see.
Sure. So in the kind of situation where that I understand would be typical in the ASCC, I think it's really important to get out in front in terms of communication. And so in my experience, helping to administer contracts for fabrication work within NASA's purview, I did have the chance while I was learning to see where things went wrong, mainly because the entities involved took too long to bring out their viewpoints on a subject, and so it's easy for an applying entity to try and hide those viewpoints as well. And I think what you can do is you can look for signals that such viewpoints may be hidden, and those often exist within application materials. And you can try and find those and bring those out in the very beginning. I think what you don't want to do is wait till everybody's invested the maximum amount possible in their sort of perspective on an issue before getting everybody to understand. And so with this conflict between neighbors, I think it's really important for an applicant to really understand if there's a preponderance of neighbors who don't like what they're trying to do. I think I honestly think if it's communicated properly, they will back down, because nobody really wants to live in a neighborhood where they're getting off on this on the back foot of having antagonized their own neighbors. And I think vice versa is true. If you have a minority of neighbors who don't like an issue with a new project, I think it would be the responsibility of the ASCC to find a diplomatic way to inform them that there's a preponderance of neighbors who are in support of it. And the whole time being careful about what is actually within people's rights, right? And that's very clear cut, and that's fairly easy to communicate clearly, and to a question actually for this committee. My understanding is the ASCC makes recommendations, but the ASCC does not have the power to stop a project or to make sure a project receives planning approval. Is this correct?
No, the ASCC does actually approve a project. It's the kind of the first line of planning approval. And so a project, a house that triggers planning review does actually have to get the approval of the commission to move forward.
Okay, that's definitely helpful to understand. I guess I had misconstrued some things that had been said in the Traffic Safety Committee about the ASCC's input on traffic safety issues.
That can be, there are also situations where ASCC offers input to the council who's making a decision. But when it comes to like a design application, the ASCC is actually the deciding body for those.
Okay.
Yeah, clarify that.
Okay. So in my past work, we had issues that I was involved when I was learning these administrative duties. I've had issues that ended in a lawsuit and it got ugly. And I think it was, in retrospect, I wasn't the primary responsibility in that case, but what I learned from that helped me in a future case where it did not end in a lawsuit. Because what we did was we saw that there were potential issues. We looked for them, we asked people, and we got everybody together so that it was understood what were statutory issues and what were things that people wanted or desired but did not have the right to demand. And I think this sort of level of communication early on is really key.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Craig?
Sure. Hi, Kenny.
Hi.
My question and my curiosity around your thoughts and your skills that you're going to bring to bear really is around the future. So we're going through the process now of preparing to enter into a new housing element cycle, which you may be familiar with from some of the preparation you've done and town meetings you've attended and so on. What that means is the state of California requires through a complex process for every town in California to plan or adjust their planning rules to allow for or help foster a certain number of housing units to be built in 8-year windows. So every 8 years, we need to come up with a new plan and adjust our planning rules to allow for a certain number of houses to be built that percolates down from the state. So in our current cycle, it's 64 housing units, I believe, and there's a mix of market rate and below market rate units in various different category levels. And for the coming cycle, we don't have a final number yet, but as it percolates through, it's looking like it's going to be somewhere around 250 units. So about 4 times as much housing production as we had in our current 8-year cycle that we're going through now. So that's obviously a huge step up from what Portola Valley's ever seen in the past. And we've sent a letter to the current percolation stage of where that number is coming from to discuss the conditions as they are on the ground in Portola Valley with our limited infrastructure, our small staff, and a number of other issues. But to some degree, we're actually getting a smaller increase than pretty much any other town in the area or any comparable town, at least on the peninsula. So the likelihood of that number changing dramatically, I'm not holding my breath, although maybe they'll pay attention to what our details on the ground are. So if you're appointed here, you're going to be, it's a 4-year position. And the housing element review will come up in about 2 years or so. So how do you foresee kind of working through that process and figuring out how the town can adapt both from the ASCC point of view, but also staff and the whole planning process? Do you have any thoughts around how we might be able to accommodate this legal requirement from the state without breaking Portola Valley?
So
a big philosophical question as opposed to a sort of more tactical one, but I'm trying to get that more expansive. How do you think about the world view?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I think there's an element of it which leads from my answer to Jeff's question, which is one of the things that this brings up with regard to keeping Portola Valley whole will just be about informing the community. We know that that there's a portion of the community who would not want the impression that this was something that was jumped on them on surprise, or that it should be clear what is being defined as a state requirement that we have to work with versus what it is that the town or the town committees or the elected townspeople have really any input on. And I think that's a key thing that I know gets discussed on, I'm on the forum, and you hear people discussing it on the street as well, is there can be a lot of misunderstanding as to what it is or that are personal pet projects versus what it is we just have to do because it's regulatory. And so that's I think a key part of keeping Portola Valley whole, is knowing that this is coming, being clear about it. Now, in terms of fitting 250 units, that to me, with my understanding of Portola Valley, hiking, I think all of the trails, actually relatively frequently, and cycling, I think I've cycled all of the roads and a lot of them fairly frequently. Because I don't get the impression from my past experience with land planning and development planning that 250 units is extreme and will even change the visual character of Portola Valley significantly. For given the number of empty lots, I just don't think 250 units is a lot. It's obviously a big change and a big step up for what has happened year to year, but it's not the kind of thing that I think will even change the visual character of Portola Valley. And so in terms of the social character, there are obviously some improvements that will come along with a denser population. We will need to look at, in the same way that the traffic safety improvements are managed, we would need to look at what kind of state support or higher level governmental support we can have to improve the infrastructure to support that. Otherwise, there's an extent to which the onus will be on some of the developers involved to make this work from an infrastructure point of view. And I don't have an impression that that would be a big issue. It will push the types of development in a certain direction, but beyond that, there is the question of whether or not, I know there is the question out there of whether or not we introduce a lot of, or in a very centralized way, kind of development that we have not ever had. And I think for that, we really need to look at the degree to which such development is required or not. And again, I think 250 units, even including low income housing, is not going to significantly change the social character or the aesthetic character. It doesn't have to, because I know that there are people.
I'm sorry,
yes.
Kenny, sorry to interrupt, but we're going way behind. Could you wrap this up and we can move on to the next question, please?
Yes, I'll wrap it up. I just think that there's, I personally know enough people who live in Portola Valley who are able to live here because their families have lived here for a long time and don't necessarily, might even fit into the low income housing. So the kind of social diversity we already have, I don't think will be severely impacted by the makeup of the 250 units that Craig, you mentioned.
Thank you.
Thank you. One small point, and I always make this point. We will be asked to plan for 250 units in varying income categories. We will not be mandated to build 250 units because we do not have the money to do that. Okay, moving on. Sarah.
Nice to meet you, Kenny. You touched a little bit before on conflict between neighbors, and my question is about conflict, potential conflict between you and a ASCC applicant. Obviously, the decisions that you make have a very personal impact on your friends and neighbors. So what approach would you personally take to making a decision that might disappoint one of your friends and neighbors?
So I think if there was somebody who was close enough to my family, I think there are certain aspects that I would need to recuse myself on. I do think I would still be able to participate in any process to build understanding, but perhaps at a sort of minimum level of recusal, I might not find myself in a position where I could cast a vote unfairly. And so this isn't, I don't think that this is something that's unique to conflict. Even if there isn't a conflict, I think if there's an applicant who's close enough to my family, and there aren't very many, it's just given limits in time, and I would like to be very, very close friends with many, many people in town, but there would be a few families for which I would not cast a vote to approve or deny an application, simply because of that conflict of interest.
Okay. I think that was a good answer. I am going to pass on my question because we are now at 1:28 p.m. and we were supposed to be done at 1:15. And I think we have a pretty good sense of you, Kenny, right now. I don't think we need another answer. So thank you so much. And we're going to move on to Colin Crenshaw, and we would really love to try to keep this at 15 minutes if we can. Colin Crenshaw?
I apologize for stretching the time.
No, it's my fault. I should have been more on it. Colin, are you there?
It's appropriate for me to leave the meeting. Is that correct?
No, you can stay. No problem.
It's up to you. No, you're welcome to go, but yeah, you're welcome to stay also.
Okay, Colin Crenshaw appears to have his mute button on.
There we go. And Colin, you're still muted if you can turn off your mute. Or, yeah. Let me see if I can.
No, right?
Briefly earlier, Colin, but you're
there. Can you hear me?
Yay.
Yes.
We see you.
All right, perfect.
Okay, good afternoon.
I feel like I always have trouble with the web version of Zoom.
No problem whatsoever. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running?
Absolutely. So my name is Colin Crenshaw. I've been here in Portola Valley for 2.5 years. I am a software engineer, not an architect like a lot of the other candidates here. I hold a master's degree from USC, and I worked in the video games industry for 10 years, working on games like Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk, before wanting to kind of have a change of pace and do something that was a little more meaningful. So I joined Tesla up here 3 years ago. I work doing user interface and user experience work for Tesla. So any of the center display or the instrument cluster stuff, that's the sort of thing that I work on. My background is kind of always been in that more art and design kind of oriented side of software engineering. And so I think that gives me, some kind of unique perspective that hopefully I can bring to the town council. Let's see. So I'm also highly technical, as you would guess, except for the Zoom meeting, and I'm hoping that I can bring some energy to the committee. I've always worked in kind of process-driven environments as a software engineer. Kind of comes with the job, and in that we're always trying to find ways to be more efficient with our time, because the more you can find those efficiencies, the more you can do with what you have in terms of your man hours. And so I'm hoping that that's something that I can help the ASCC with, and that maybe I can find ways in which we can improve our efficiency and get more done. I want to join the ASCC because I think it's an important part of what the town does, and an important aspect of the master plan for the town. And I can see that the ASCC meetings have been canceled a lot lately. And so the backlog that's there is probably getting deeper and deeper. And so when we find these efficiencies, that will help us, kind of burn through that backlog and get caught up, so that the town can get that additional living space or office space they need to work, especially in this kind of challenging environment we have now, where we're all kind of, crammed in at home, when previously we would have been in our own offices and kids at daycare, and now everyone's, right on top of each other, and having those extra spaces is kind of important, more now than ever. But, it also affects the, housing crisis that we have, and that there's a desire for, more ability to house people, even if that's, family members and in-law suites. And so getting through that backlog helps, provide those spaces as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Colin. First question is from John Richards. John.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for applying for this position. It's great to have people.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah. My question is, in ASCC, when reviewing major projects, neighborhood character is always a major consideration. Mm-hmm. And so what are the elements of neighborhood character that you feel are most important to be reviewed or considered?
Yeah, so I think part of what's that's great about the character of Portola Valley is that it's not super ostentatious, and it has like a sense of place to it. When I drive through Atherton, not to point fingers or anything, I look at these like mishmash of Tuscan villas and like, brutalist architecture, and I look at it and I go like, none of you belong here in California. Like, none of this style is California, and it just feels like this weird, I don't know, Disneyland sort of thing. And it's all about like showing like, oh, I have money or status or whatever. And I really appreciate that Portola Valley is much more about, that sense of place. It knows where it's from and where it has its roots, and it doesn't have like this weird mishmash. Everything's kind of cohesive. As someone who rides horses and loves the open space, that's why we pick Portola Valley. Is I can walk right out my front door right onto Mid-Peninsula State Park land, and go for miles and miles, and that kind of agricultural feel, I think, is kind of also important, and I want to protect that.
Great, thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, Colin. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you, Jeff. Congrats.
Thank you. My question will be about sort of managing conflict, especially among, you will have projects where an applicant will come to the ASCC and neighbors will disagree with them over sort of what should or shouldn't happen on their property. Do you have any sort of feel for how you would navigate those conflicts, where you would set boundaries, how you would deal with that particular, if you have experiences where you've had to sort of manage that among groups, it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, software engineering is always that kind of thing, and then we have different teams that have different goals. I think I saw this a lot more in video games, where design wants to throw in like as many different features as they possibly can for a particular video game. And engineering is trying to ship the product with the least number of bugs possible, and those things are often at odds with one another. And so you're always having to try and do that dance of trying to satisfy both groups by finding places of compromise, and setting down where like the kind of the red lines are things that cannot be breached. I at least have the advantage of not being an architect that's going to have, work potentially for the ASCC. And so I think that removes one conflict of interest I have. But the individuals that are bringing their projects forward, yeah, there's always going to be potentially a conflict between, someone's desire for their personal right to build whatever it is that they want to build on their property, and their neighbor's right to kind of not have something that is going to lower their property value built next to them, kind of thing, or something that lowers undermines like the quality of the town. So I think my process would be largely to try and bring together the different people and understand what's important to them, because that's not always clear from their proposal, and try and find where those things kind of meet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Craig.
Sure, I'm gonna tweak my question from how I asked of Kenny, to try and maybe get a more focused, timely answer since we're running a bit behind. We are about to enter into a new housing cycle as mandated by the state, and need to considerably modify our current planning, probably in order to plan to have somewhere on the order of 250 housing units built in Portola Valley over 8 years, where in the current cycle, the target was 64. So it's a considerably faster growth rate than what Portola Valley has experienced before under our historic rules. Do you have any thoughts around how we'll be able to adapt the town to much faster than the used to growth rate without breaking all of the things that you were talking about that we all love about Portola Valley?
Yeah, it's a very difficult problem, because you're trying to weigh a whole bunch of different like sticky points, and that where is it going to be built? How many? What's it going to look like? Are services and roads able to support that? I think the first step would be to try and determine like suitable locations for that growth. How much of that growth can be achieved through say splitting lots and people building additional housing on smaller plots. I think that potentially you could still maintain the town's character, without necessarily having acre large lots or half acre large lots. And if you have specific areas that are set aside for that, some communities are happy to have neighbors with kids or whatever nearby that they could play with. That those smaller distances are actually can be beneficial, and seeing where those areas sit relative to the services and infrastructure that would be needed. So, for instance, you wouldn't want to put dense housing on some narrow little road, right? It has to be something that's close to easy access, and wouldn't be putting undue pressure on those like small roads or roads that are congested because of school hours, drop off, pick up, that kind of thing. And then I think you just have to weigh all those different things and try and make like the hard decision of where's the appropriate place to kind of achieve that growth, and then set about doing it.
Thanks. You're on mute, Marianne.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you for applying. And my question has to do with personal interactions with your friends and neighbors within the community. The decisions that you would make on ASCC would have a very personal impact on somebody. Am I echoing?
Someone is.
Actually, it sounds like
It could be because.
Sorry about that. So anyhow, the question is, you know, the decisions that you would make has the potential to have a very personal impact on somebody, a friend or neighbor who's building their dream home. And I'm just curious how you would handle making a decision that could have that level of personal impact on a neighbor.
Well, I think I'm actually kind of uniquely situated in that I'm one of the very few that live up here on Skyline. And I don't really have neighbors that are especially close to me. I think that I would try and handle it though in the same way that I handle management problems at my job. I think transparency of why a decision's made is really important here, because if the person doesn't understand like your rationale, then it's really hard for them to like put themselves in your position and see why you would make those choices. And it becomes easily more hurtful. And so if you are very clear on that, on your decision-making process, then I think that helps tremendously with that. And you have to just be kind of true to yourself and your decision-making process. Like try not to allow how other people would feel about something affect your choice. Like if I have to get a feature in and it's going to negatively impact one of my reports by making them work extra hours, I can't be worried about that. I have to get, you know, the thing done. And so I'm going to make that choice, but I'm going to explain why I'm making that choice and why it's important all along the way so that they understand that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Colin, you have 2 minutes to answer this question. And the question is, I don't know if you're familiar with our design guidelines, but are there any elements in there that you would change?
That's a great question. I am fairly familiar. I've read through the different guidelines multiple times. I think that maybe the hole that's in the guidelines is how we handle prefab construction. There's a lot of potential for prefab to help with staying green, with the going green kind of process, and that they potentially have significantly less waste materials and energy requirements because you're kind of building them assembly line style. And but there's not really like a place inside our guidelines for how to handle prefab buildings, whether that be like a storage shed or an outbuilding for an office or a barn. And so providing specific guidelines around those things around the prefabs and where they fit within the process, I think would help streamline them getting through and kind of allow us to make more efficient impact.
Great, thank you. I really like that question. I'm a big fan of tiny houses, and we really haven't planned for those either. Okay, thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
And thank you for fitting within the 15-minute window. Now we will move on to Megan Michael.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello.
Megan?
Yeah.
There she is.
Hi, Megan. Okay, in about 2 minutes or 3 minutes, could you tell us who you are and why you are applying for this position?
Yeah. So my name is Megan Michael, and I moved to Portola Valley about 10 years ago. We actually moved to Portola Valley. We were one of those people who is, I'm the sandwich generation. So I had a 4-year-old and my mother moved in with us. And so we were looking for a property where we could have some place for her to live with us and still all be speaking to each other. So, so yeah, that's what brought us here. Prior to, I have a design business, an interior design business called Megan Michael Design that I run from my studio on our property. And prior to that, I was in the furniture industry for 20 years. So I've been associated with interiors and architecture really my whole career. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. John.
John, you're muted.
John. Woo.
Sorry. Yeah, I forgot that. Welcome. Thank you for applying. I will just ask the question regarding, let me find it here, neighborhood character. So when reviewing major projects in town, the ASCC does consider neighborhood character very prominently in the deliberations. What elements of neighborhood character do you feel are most important?
I think when I read through the general plan and the design guidelines, I have to say I was so impressed and humbled by what I think is a very well thought out plan at the conception of the town, which is that the buildings are subservient to the natural surroundings, because when you move to Portola Valley, you're here because you love the valley, you love our hills. And so I actually love that specific guideline. I think that's great.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff.
Hi, Megan.
Hey, Jeff.
So I'm going to stick to my script as well. Conflict. You're going to have people apply and their neighbors are not always going to like what they're doing. You'll have to you'll get caught in the middle of that. What are your tools for dealing with those situations?
Well, you know, I was giving of the things that I really thought about when I applied for this role, Jeff, the how to deal with neighbors that may or may not like a decision was the one that gave me pause, because I feel very integrated into the community. And so really wanted to make sure that I had thought a lot about that. So one way, and I think other applicants have answered in this way, and I think it's a good method, is to bring people along in the decision. Certainly if there was some area in which I felt that I needed to recuse myself, I would. But I think to bring people along in as much as you can in any decision that you make. When we did our own personal project where we added an ADU and the studio, we got feedback from neighbors on either side. And this is really interesting. One of the ways that we resolved the conflict for my studio with a downhill neighbor is that the studio where I am now, this is a little 300 square foot building and it's a square. And we carved out one corner for the downhill neighbor. And that made her really happy. So I think sometimes compromise is the higher road. So I think I would just bring people along as much as I can and be okay that I've stayed true to the town's values.
Okay, thank you.
Righty, Craig.
Yes, my question is about kind of the future of the town, and if you're appointed to this ACC seat, an issue that you'll be heavily involved with, which is our next housing element cycle, which begins in a couple years, and which is going to have the state requiring us to build new housing units about 4 times the rate that we've been doing historically. So in the current 8-year cycle, we had to plan for about 64 units, and then the coming cycle, it's going to be more like 250. And so what are your thoughts on that and how we can do that in a way that satisfies our state requirements, but doesn't break Portola Valley that we all know and love?
Well, that's a super easy question. No, that's geez. So I have to say, I heard Marianne earlier say that she really reiterated the point that we'd be planning for 250 units, that we wouldn't necessarily turn around and build 250 units. I think that's a very valid point. But I do think in terms of the planning, that I would go back to the tenets that we set forth in the guidelines for the town, which is to have the buildings be subservient to our natural surroundings. I think Portola Valley Ranch does a really good job of that. When I see other areas that are more dense and are less well thought out, I don't think they do as good a job. I think you have to appeal to people's understanding of what we're trying to do as a state and how we play a role in that community as well. And how does Portola Valley want to show up within the goals of the state and finding housing for people?
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. Megan, you basically answered my question as part of Jeff's question. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit and just ask a little bit more about your background and if you've served on any municipal committees or commissions before. And if so, what did you enjoy or not enjoy about that experience?
I don't know if I've ever served on a municipal committee. I certainly volunteered at our local schools frequently. You know, we had no art program until the kids went into Corte Madera. So I was a fixture at Ormondale for a long time and always served on the committees there that supported, that got funds and that kind of thing. I was on the master plan team at Alpine Hills. No, it's funny, since I've told a personal story about our neighbors when we did our project, the chairman of the master plan team was my uphill neighbor who actually had feedback for us when we did our project. So it was interesting to sort of work through that feedback with him and then to serve on a committee with him. So it was also interesting for me to watch a group of people on that committee in town trying to better understand the town's process. What was sort of evident to me and like, well, why wouldn't you know this? You all live in Portola Valley. A lot of people even on that committee really didn't know. Prior to my joining, they had hired an architect from Monterey. He really didn't understand. So there was definitely a learning curve there. You know, and I looked through the planning guidelines. There is really a lovely statement, I'm sure I'll misquote it, but about you really should get your team to understand these guidelines. And so I think that was one of the things I learned being on the Alpine Hills team, was that I think that process would have been much more streamlined had we not had to bring the architect along and understanding who Portola Valley was. I mean, it's been I think it's a great outcome, but anyway, did I answer your question, Sarah?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you, Megan.
Okay.
Since you have had experience with the town building projects, and so you must be familiar with our design guidelines, are there aspects that you think could use a little tune-up or a little change, or as Colin pointed out, something we might not have even considered?
I will say that bringing people, well, maybe one is specific to the guidelines and maybe one is just a different way to think about feedback, which is figure out a way to insert ourselves in the design process earlier so that when owners are building their dream home, that we're not showing up as some sort of, in their view, an afterthought after they've spent a year with their architect. So I think look for ways for us to insert ourselves earlier in the process. Specifically, I would talk about the fire department and the integration of the fire department. In both the Alpine Hills project and my own personal project, that came so late that we had to scramble for funds. I both personally had to scramble for funds, and I remember Alpine Hills had to go like, oh wait, we've got some stuff that we forgot to plan for. So I think integrating the fire department and integrating the ASCC into the planning process as early as possible would be good.
Okay, really great suggestions. Thank you. Thank you, Megan.
All right.
Thank you, Megan.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We will move on to our next applicant, Tom Parker.
Hello.
Hello, Tom.
Can you see me? I have no video.
I can see your name.
I see you now.
And I get,
there we go.
There you are. There you are.
Some crazy background.
You're floating in the universe.
I guarantee you that has to do with my kids.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are applying for this position?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, even to this step. I am a local licensed contractor here in California. I live in Portola Valley, of course. My wife and kids and I moved to the Bay Area several years ago from the Sierra Nevadas to be closer to her family. Her grandfather has owned land in Woodside for many, many years. And we wanted to be closer to them and help take care of them. And we absolutely fell in love with Ladera and tried for 2 years to get a house in here. And finally, right as the original shelter in place hit, we actually were able to buy a house and moved in May, and are super excited about being here and love the community. And we hadn't even got to experience what it's all about. We lived in Mariposa, just outside Yosemite, and I had just gotten on the board for the Architectural Review Committee there as well. It's very important to me to be a part of the community that you live in and to be able to give back in some way. And with my background, not only as a contractor, I used to be a licensed realtor in Texas, and I have an architecture degree. So these are all things that lend itself to being on a committee like this. And I'm definitely very interested in doing this just to kind of help set our roots down and become part of the community more than we already are.
All righty, thank you.
You bet.
John, do you have a question for Tom?
I do. Tom, welcome, and thank you for applying.
Thank you.
So when ASCC reviews projects, one of the major considerations is neighborhood character. What are the elements of neighborhood character that you see as being most important?
It's a great question. Neighborhood character is vital as far as I'm concerned. One of the things about Portola Valley is when we started looking in this area, the whole town has a certain character. And within a neighborhood, you know, a lot of times there is some sort of governing body, such as an HOA, that helps enforce certain things. But just in general, just keeping that overall feel, that's part of it. And then the other key element to me, and especially living here, is to be able to keep the cohesion with nature and what's natural, and not to try to upset any of the environmental issues that we tend to have as we develop neighborhoods and develop just structures in general.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Jeff.
Okay, I'm going to stick with my question right now. You know, stepping into an application where neighbors may disagree with the applicant or may have different priorities or us. Do you have any sort of experiences, tools, things you would like to apply, trying to sort of foster some kind of agreement among the various people on both sides of an application?
Well, there are certain things that you can do. You know, there are guidelines of course, that we're trying to follow, obviously, and being able to rely on those as part of the backbone of the decision-making process is part of the way that we can help resolve conflict when those things do arise, and they do. We've all been part of neighbor disputes, I'm sure, at one time or another. If one thing that the current political climate has taught us all, there seems to be a great need for us to be able to work together instead of just driving a larger wedge. It seems to be kind of the climate of all things in the world right now. And I think just being able to stop and listen to concerns, of course, and then be able to intelligently respond, and also to be able to back your response up with what's really part of the guidelines and what we're trying to accomplish as a committee.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Craig.
I have a pre-question before my regular question. The pre-question's short. Tom, to clarify for me, you live in Ladera, not within the boundaries of the town of Portola Valley?
That is correct.
Okay. So my main question is that as we're looking towards the tail end of this 4-year term that you're applying for, we're getting from the state a big increase in our required number of housing units that we're going to be required to build in our next housing element cycle. And it's going to be about, a 4 times increase in terms of the rate at which we need to be producing housing units over the coming 8-year cycle versus the current 8-year cycle. So how do you anticipate, with your knowledge of Portola Valley and the area, and kind of how we go about housing development and review and so on, how do you anticipate that changing to accommodate 4 times the number of applications and approvals that need to be going through relative to where we are now without losing what makes Portola Valley so attractive?
Well, thank you for the question. Honestly, that's probably the biggest challenge that the committee has in front of them as far as I'm concerned, because again, as we have talked about, and in most of the application letters, everybody seems to be on the same page about the beauty of Portola Valley, and its consistency with what's been done in the past has been one of the big draws. I think that we are going to, let me stop myself. I don't have the answer, and I'll be the first to tell you I don't have the answer. I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to not only look into what we have done in the past to try to keep that consistency, but then we're going to have to look outside the borders of Portola Valley and see other neighboring communities, not just our neighbors, but anywhere that we can find good examples of the same challenges that were faced by their communities, where they've been able to successfully keep that consistent feel while being able to endure the growth that's coming. There's going to be good examples and bad examples, and I'm a firm believer in raising 5 kids. I'm a firm believer that there's many lessons you learn from failures as you do from successes. So we can certainly look at some of the neighboring communities to help us learn what to do and what not to do as well throughout this process. That would be my best answer for you.
Thanks, Tom.
You bet.
Okay, Sarah.
Hi, Tom.
Hi there.
Thank you. My question is a bit of a follow-up to the one that Jeff asked, and just kind of pivots to your personal relationships. So in this role, there are going to be people that come before the committee that are your friends and perhaps not necessarily your neighbors, given that you're in Ladera. But when you are having to make decisions about a friend that would impact their dream home, how would you go about, making those decisions and your comfort level with communicating them?
The best way for me to answer that question is very simple. My wife and I have worked together side by side for many years. And one of the challenges that you face in that is being able to separate your personal life and your professional life. I feel like I'm very adept at being able to do that. So there are going to be certain instances where, like you say, I've got a friend that's, up in front of the committee, the council, to get an approval. And if it's not going to go the direction that they want it to go, there's a certain amount of diplomacy that you have to employ to be able to get the message across to them of what's happening. But at the same time, there is a certain amount of, listen, this is nothing personal. This is not a personal knock on you. This isn't about our friendship. This is about what's keeping our community what our community is. And I think it's just, there's going to have to be a certain level of just separating the personal from professional in an instance like that, and then being able to communicate why the decisions are being made to that person, because just giving somebody a no, most of the time it's not going to be good enough. Just like anybody else, I want to know why I'm being told no if the answer is no.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, Tom, since you are a contractor, since you are coming from Mariposa, which is a smaller rural community, it's bigger than Portola Valley.
For sure.
Since you were going to be on their design review committee, correct?
That is correct.
You must have some familiarity with design guidelines, and I assume you've at least looked at ours.
I have.
So do you have any suggestions for places we could improve or tune up?
At this point in time, I'm sorry, I really don't, because as being a new member to this area, unfortunately, I'm just now learning this. I do have something on my side. My wife is also a licensed realtor, and I think she probably knows more about Ladera than I do, and we will definitely play off each other in that case. But I don't have an answer as far as what we could effectively improve at this point in time. I'd like to be able to come in with ideas of my own, but I also want to find out where everybody else is before I start I feel like I might be kind of going rogue if I come in and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I feel like we should change. Sometimes I think sitting and listening, especially in the beginning, is probably the best course of action.
Okay.
Probably not the answer you wanted, so.
No, that's a good answer. Is your design review committee also 5 people who are volunteers?
They were all volunteers. We actually rarely met.
Oh, really?
It was interesting. The design review committee for Mariposa was within the town limits only, and it wasn't the entire town on top of that. If you're familiar at all with Mariposa, it's a very historic, basically it's the strip through downtown as you're going through to go toward Yosemite.
Yep.
It was comprised of a lot of older members, and if they didn't show up and we didn't have a quorum, nothing happened. And in fact, we got caught up in a couple of changes. We owned rental property in Mariposa, and we couldn't even get anybody to look at our plans for 2 months, and they were holding up the process of us. And it was the simplest of things. It was a door color on an exterior door. And they did look at every single thing because they wanted the historical accuracy of the old gold rush town, and to be able to just go in, you couldn't just do anything within their borders for sure. So to be honest with you, I don't even know how many members they had because we never had a full meeting.
Okay, interesting. Thanks. So
you bet.
Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Good luck in the process. I look forward to hearing back from you soon.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Okay, our next applicant is good old Dave Ross. Dave? I see you. I see you are muted.
He may not have heard you. I was having him join just as you started talking, Marianne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dave, it's Dave Ross. You're up.
I'm here.
Great.
There he is.
Great.
Hi.
Great.
Hey, Dave.
Hi, Marianne. Hello, everybody.
I'm really glad to see you, actually. You look good.
Thank you. I feel good.
Okay, tell us why you decided to re-up yet again.
It's become a bad habit, I guess. No, I guess enjoy is the wrong word, but I get a sense of satisfaction out of participating in this way. I have a lot of respect for what you guys do, but I don't think I could do it. I'm not as patient as your job requires, but I find that the ASCC gives me a good way to participate and contribute my experience and skills, and to do it in a fairly, by Portola Valley standards, I'd call it a fairly rigorous process. We have, great support and help from the staff in keeping us organized and walking us through that process. And I like that sort of single focus that we have. So it's, I find it really fulfilling, actually. And sure, there are times when it can be a bit of a chore, and times when it gets a little bit tense, but I think it's a really valuable place for people in the community. If more people would come to the meetings or attend the meetings who weren't actually applicants, I think they would have a better appreciation of why Portola Valley is the way it is. And I think that's a good role for me to play, and one that I've been enjoying. So I'm looking forward to serving another term if that is the will of council.
Thanks. John Richards.
Yes, Dave, good to see you.
Hey, John.
Hey, so I'm going to ask you a different question. I'm going to ask you about subjective versus objective review. It's always a balance, and I'm wondering, how do you feel our balance is on that when we go through ACC review? Does subjective review need more or less weight, or have we pushed it as far as we can?
Well, that's something that I grapple with on many applications. But one of the things I'm comforted by is that with 5 different commissioners who have a range of approaches to evaluating that question, I feel pretty comfortable that we find a good middle ground. I find myself maybe a little bit more, trying to be a little bit more on the objective side. You know, what is allowable within the parameters of the zoning code? And then second, what is suggested by the design guidelines? And I think each one of us tries to find some sort of a balance, but definitely there are commissioners that are more on the subjective side than I am, and I appreciate hearing their perspectives. So I think it's less a task for each individual commissioner to try to find that balance than it is for us all to work to find that balance among us.
Great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I am going to ask the same question, but obviously you have a different perspective on it, having experienced the interactions directly. Do you what do you see happening in terms of sort of applicant responses to projects, and do you feel like we can address them better or in some different way in our process?
Well, I've seen quite a range of responses, and I'm sure that all of you who served on the ASCC experienced the same thing. Some people are very appreciative for not just the general role the ASCC plays, but for helping them and their design teams fine-tune a project to make it a good project that both serves their needs and you know, fits into their neighborhood or into the community. On the other hand, there are applicants who don't go away satisfied, even if their project gets approved. I think it was early in this current term when we actually approved an application. We approved it unanimously. It had some conditions, but the applicant really wasn't happy, and he came back and interrupted the next item so that he could, you know, try to pound the desk a little bit and complain about how he'd been treated. So I've certainly seen a wide range. I'd say most people fall in the middle, where they recognize it's a valuable process. They don't always enjoy it. It certainly adds time to their process and cost. But my sense is that most applicants see it as being a fairly objective process, and I use the word fairly in 2 ways: that it is fair, and it's not an exact science, that, you know, we're always trying to approximate good answers, and I think we get there most of the time. I think the design professionals who are used to being on the design teams for the applicants in town have come to rely on us in some respects as a valuable resource in getting to the right design. And then there are some design professionals that have come to us once and sworn to never do it again. So, but I think it's been going on long enough, and it's a system that's been working. I think we always need to keep an eye on trying to make it a little bit less cumbersome and easier for people to navigate through. So that's something I'm hoping to see happen during the next term, is a continued focus on simplifying things to the extent that we can and still fulfill our mission.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Dave, I'm sure you have many thoughts and ideas on this issue, but in the interest of keeping the meeting running smoothly, perhaps we can focus on a limited subset of that. But as we approach the next RHNA housing cycle and need to revamp our housing element in the general plan to accommodate what may be a 4x increase in our number of units that we need to plan to be built, what approach do you think we should take to allow for that massively increased volume in housing production without breaking Portola Alley as we know it?
Well, I'm hoping that there can be a kind of organic solution that finds housing in a number of different ways. And I know these ideas have been hashed over for years, but I think we took a big step in establishing the town's approach to ADUs. And I can see us going a little farther with that. I think particularly in denser neighborhoods, it's possible that ADUs can be built on smaller sites than current zoning allows. I think there also could be some greater outreach to legalize some, I'll call them under the radar ADUs that exist now and could count as part of the housing stock, but aren't recognized that way because, you know, they're grandfathered in, their legacy, built at a time when there was less formality about these things. And I think that there's actually a fair number of smaller dwelling units in our community that simply aren't on the list. So I'd like to see us try to find those and outreach to the property owners and find a comfortable, relatively easy path for those housing units to be legalized, recognizing they'll need to meet building codes and so on, but actively assisting that. I think that could be a less expensive option than many that are possible by simply trying to make it as easy as possible to legalize existing non-legal secondary housing.
Thanks.
Okay, Sarah.
It's nice to meet you quasi in person, David. My question is just a tweak on the one that I've been asking. Given your experience, you must have dealt over the years with a situation where you had a friend or neighbor coming before you with their dream home and you had to make some tough calls. Based on those experiences, what do you think are the best practices in terms of handling those kind of situations?
Well, in my personal experience, I rely on what I call my professional persona. And I have the good fortune to have a consulting career actually in the construction industry. And over the last 20 years or so, as I've been doing this pretty actively, I've been able to develop a kind of professional detachment where in some circumstances I might get rather engaged in a non-professional way. And so when it's hard to avoid people that you know, or that are neighbors, or that are friends in such a small town. But one of the things that I do for me personally is I try to limit the amount of contact I have with somebody who is thinking about making an application. Say a neighbor or a friend who comes to me I try to keep them a little bit at arm's length on that subject. I don't want to become their advocate. I don't want to really become their sounding board. I don't mind offering a little bit of insight about how the process works, but I try not to get engaged in people's potential applications just because I don't want them to see me as either an opponent or an ally. I want to maintain a very neutral approach. We'll wait to see what the staff report has to say. Work with staff, come forward with the best project that you can, pay attention to the guidelines, and but not to offer any guidance or opinions about how their project looks or what sort of things they should do to make it acceptable to the commission. It's tough sometimes.
So Dave, today there are 4 brand new applicants who each want a seat on the ACC. What advice would you give to these new people, or in other words, what have you learned that you could pass on?
My single, for me, I think the most important piece of advice to somebody who is thinking about joining the ASCC is to attend several meetings. It's a really simple, maybe too simple sounding piece of advice. I'd leave it to council to select people with the right skills and judgment and so on. But I think in order to prepare oneself for the job and to get a better understanding of how they might fit into it, it's a really great idea to go to some meetings. They're easier to attend at the moment because they're online. They're also a little bit different that way, as I'm sure you guys have experienced too. But I think that anybody who has issues about how the ASCC operates or how it's perceived to operate, I really try to get them to come to some meetings. And we see very few members of the public at the meetings, unless they're interested in one of the agenda items. And I think it's just it's a really interesting piece of community dynamics that takes place there. And getting involved in it in the abstract is a little bit risky. I think it's a good idea to see it in action and go to more than one meeting in order to get a sense of the range of things that might happen there that one might have to deal with as a commissioner.
When I was first elected to the council in 2005, I attended every single planning commission meeting for 2 years. I did not attend all the ASCC meetings, but I felt that that was how I had to educate myself. So thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Right. Our last applicant for the ASCC today is Al Sill. Al?
Al's just popping in, so it might be a second.
And I will leave you all. Good afternoon.
Take care, Dave.
Al, can you hear me? It's Jeremy. Al, you there?
You're on mute, Al, if you're trying to talk.
Okay, there we go. How's
There
that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Al, hi.
Hello, how are you?
I am fine. Can you tell us why you have decided to reapply to the ASCC?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I'm making a valuable contribution to a important role. You know, and then more specifically, I like the opportunity to keep an eye on sustainability and fire prevention things from a you know, ASCC point of view. So, you know, both of those, and then just in general, I like having a hand in how the town evolves in terms of balancing development versus the rural character of the town.
Okay, thank you. John Richards.
Hi, Al.
Hello.
See you, but I guess I hear you. Okay, so
you don't see me, huh? What's going
just
on?
your name?
Your camera looks like it's off. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right, sorry.
Okay, so Al, I was going to ask you about the same question I asked Dave.
There we go.
There you are.
Oh, there you are. Okay, that's better.
Okay.
So how do you see the balance of objective versus subjective review in the SEC's role?
How do I see it currently, or
yeah,
what would I like
currently,
to see?
and whether or not it needs to change? One should be emphasized more than the other.
I mean, from an ASCC point of view, I think we basically are handling the subjective. I think that the planning staff handles the objective side of things fine. And in terms of, yeah, I guess I don't see it as a particular issue. I think that we wouldn't need an ASCC if it was all objective things.
Right.
And, you know, project by project, it kind of varies. So yeah, I guess I just don't see it as a particular issue. There are always going to be subjective things. It's a complex area in terms of trying to decide whether or not things conform to design guidelines and general plan and things like that. But in terms of the actual ordinances and the objective rules, I think that the planning staff does a good job with that. And, you know, it's on the ASCC to make sure that we apply an appropriate level of judgment on the subjective things.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Jeff.
Thanks. Hey, Al.
Hello.
My question for you, which is kind of a variation of what I've been asking all along, is in your time on ASCC, do you feel like sort of the interactions between applicants and neighbors, do you see any changes, any trends among them? And just in general, how are you handling them? And do you have any suggestions or anything that might make them smoother? Or
that's a good question. Yeah, it does seem like over time there have been stronger negative feelings from some neighbors. And I think that forces us to be, or try to be, more clear in explaining our positions and, you know, what we're for, what we're against. But it does seem like some of the projects over the last couple of years have gotten more contentious. And in terms of what we need to do, I think transparency, clarity are important, but unfortunately, a number of the issues are kind of emotional and people get locked into their particular view and they almost get to the point where I don't feel like they're listening, even if we are clear, which, you know, unfortunately, we're not always as clear and as we should be. But I think it's on us to really explain things and link them back to the design guidelines and the general plan, since that's kind of really at the core of what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Right, Craig.
Al, so you've been on ASCC for a while now and have seen sort of the pattern of how it works. But looking ahead to you know, the upcoming term to which you're seeking appointment, a significant piece of work that's going to happen is figuring out our next housing element for the next RHNA cycle towards the 4-year term. And it's looking a lot like we're going to have to roughly quadruple the pace of housing development in Portola Valley. What are your thoughts on that? And you know, one or two things that you might do to make that process be smooth as we dramatically increase the amount of work that ASCC is going to have to be doing, or that the planning staff's going to have to be doing if we move things to be ministerial approval as opposed to ASCC, and how do we do that without breaking what Portola Valley is and has been?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think that the real way to do it is sort of economies of scale. We need to, if we really think the solution is ADUs, we need to have some pre-approved things that people can draw upon, almost like a library of approved designs. And then the other way to scale, I think, is to have some developments that are more than just single family housing. You know, and that is something that it's going to be a real challenge to fit in to the town culture and get through and make sure it's done in an appropriate way. But, you know, if you do 10 units instead of 1, it's not 10 times as much work. I mean, when we approved 6 units at the Priory, it was probably only 1.5x at the most the work of a normal project. So I think that, you know, in terms of scaling, those are the approaches that we'll have to take in terms of balancing the work and making sure that we get housing through at a approved at an appropriate rate to meet the requirements.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Hi, Al.
Hi, Sarah.
My question has to do with personal relationships and kind of along the lines of Jeff's question, but pivoting to how you deal with making decisions that are going to impact a project that one of your neighbors or friends is building. And I'm curious, in your experience, I'm sure you've come across having to deal with this, what you think are best practices in terms of navigating those kind of sensitive situations.
Oh, let's see. I mean, partly, I don't think I have quite as broad of a network of friends in town as some people do. So I don't feel like this has come up a whole bunch, but there have been a couple instances where I did know the people that were involved.
Or even if, you know, how would you advise somebody coming on how to navigate that were that to happen to them?
Right.
What are the best practices you think?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, you almost in that situation, you have to ignore the fact that you know somebody, and everything goes back to sort of our base documents, and we need to be able to explain our decisions relative to those documents and do it in a way that is, you know, clearly unbiased. Make sure that everybody gets their full opportunity to speak, and that we listen to it, but that nobody gets sort of special handling. Yeah, I guess I just have not seen that from my perspective as being a particular significant issue. I don't feel like people get any sort of special treatment if they're well known when they're before us. And I feel like everybody gets kind of a fair shot.
Thank you.
Okay, Al. So you were appointed in 2015?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
right at the end of 2015, I think, yeah.
Okay, so this is basically, you're going for a second term.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this has been a really tough year on the commissions with COVID, and I know that many, many meetings were canceled for Planning Commission and ASCC, and staff was working on realigning everything to go online. And then we had our planning director was out on medical leave. And I know there was a lot of frustration on ASCC that things weren't getting done. And I know there was a discussion about how things have shifted a bit and perhaps it's a little more staff driven. And
yeah, there was a little bit of discussion on that. Yep.
And that maybe in the coming year, there might be a few changes. Are there any changes that you would like to see in the coming year relative to the way the ASCC is run, or the relationship with the staff, or the relationship with the applicant?
Yeah, let's see. What's the right way to put this? I guess that at times I feel like the staff gets a little bit bogged down with the bureaucratic aspects of the role. And I just would feel better if we always kept the sort of the big picture in mind, that, you know, making sure that the right piece of paper is moved at the right time isn't really why we're here. Why we're really here is to make sure that the people who want to do some development get a fair hearing, and that in the end, we end up with a community that still has the feel that we want. So, you know, to do that, I think it's just going to take a little bit more experience from the planning staff. I mean, the first thing that they can do, the first thing they can learn as they come on board is, well, what are the specific things that I need to do, you know, in terms of how do I have to write up a report? What date does something have to get done? But I don't know that we're always doing a good enough job thinking in terms of, you know, does this at all fit with what makes sense in Portola Valley? And I think that's what I'd like to see more of.
Okay, fair enough. I know that's a hard question for an engineer. All right, that concludes our interviews with our ASCC members. I will now take some very limited questions from the public. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Jeremy, do you see any hands raised?
No, I don't, but it might be just since we're doing a meeting, it might be.
They can't raise their hands?
They may not be able to raise their hands. So if someone does have.
Hey, I see a hand.
Did you see a hand?
Betsy Morgan-Thaler. Okay, and Betsy, we are
there we go.
Running late, so
Thank
you, Betsy. Thank you. Oh, mute. You're muted.
Betsy, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. This would be directed at the incumbent, the two incumbents, if they're both still here, or the one that is here.
Okay.
And that is really, as you look at the needs amongst the assembled ASCC members, what are the deficits that you would most like to fill?
Mary Ann, can I just ask on a point of order, are we directing questions from the public to the applicant? Or these
I was just about to text Jeremy. Jeremy?
May I can ask the town council the same question if you prefer. And maybe if it's inappropriate, I withdraw it. But as I was listening to each member, the background is, I was wondering what skill sets are well represented, what skill sets do we need to bolster?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sorry that it's just directed to Al Sil. I realized that we got down to one person, which wasn't my intent.
I'm happy to answer the question if it's directed to me, but I don't want to answer it if I shouldn't answer it.
Jeremy, point of order.
Through the chair, my apologies, Betsy. So just the way that these things work is, since it's a very particular kind of meeting today, and you know, we don't, although we've historically been very informal at the council level related to questions directed at folks, but for this meeting, I think it's best to you know, form any questions as a comment, and to the best abilities, the council can either decide to ask something or take it under consideration. Thanks.
And Betsy, I didn't mean to cut you off specifically, or anything about the content of your question or anything. It's really just a procedural issue, especially given that we're already running a bit late on time.
Sorry, I stepped into an open invitation and I'll withdraw.
If you would like to form your question into a comment.
No, I think I'm going to withdraw. It sounds a little too complicated, right? Okay. For the time available. But right. Thank you.
Boy,
thank
yeah.
you anyway.
Thanks, Betsy.
Okay, are there any other comments from the audience? And Jeremy, are you able to see if there are any comments?
The chat feature's off, so if anyone does have a request, just turn your camera on and wave at us. That's probably the best we can do right now.
I think you can raise hands on the participant window as well.
Yes. I haven't seen any hands get raised either, so.
Yeah, you can raise.
It works. Wonderful. Can. I think we're okay then, Marianne. Okay.
All right. Let me get back over here. Okay, so now we each need to take a moment or two to gather our thoughts and vote for 3 ASCC commissioners. There are 6 applicants. We can only vote for 3. How much time should we allot to this, Jeremy?
Well, there's a couple different things to consider. First is that the next round is
about to start.
You probably do want to take a break in between just for a couple minutes. So we should take that under consideration. We haven't in the past had a discussion per se. People just voted, although we're doing it a little bit differently here because we want to make sure everything's transparent. We're essentially what Sharon's going to do is go through each council member and ask your votes, and I'm going to tally them here, and then I'll announce the winner or the appointees, I should say.
So just to clarify, Sharon had circulated voting slips that we've traditionally used in in-person meetings, which then get read aloud. But the idea is we would just read our own slip aloud over the Zoom call rather than have to try and forward the document anywhere.
No, not at all. Just read it aloud and I will tally it in my end.
Sounds
so
good.
When Sharon calls your name, you read your slip aloud. Okay, do people need any time to do this, or have you all made your choices? John, are you ready?
Sarah? I'm not ready, but sure, let's go ahead.
Wait, Jeff, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
I think I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Well, I knew Sarah was ready because she's always ready. Okay, Sharon, why don't you do roll call and we'll just see where people are at.
Okay, Councilmember Alves.
Well, I will thank all the applicants. This is a really good round of interviews. I will be voting to maintain our 2 incumbents, Dave Ross and Al Sill. And for the 3rd seat, I'm casting my vote for Megan Michael.
Thank you. Councilmember Warnikoff.
In alphabetical order, I am voting for Al, Dave, and Megan.
Thank you. Councilmember Richards.
Okay, let's see if I'm muted. Yeah. I am voting for Al, Dave, and Kenny Chung.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Hughes.
I'd like to thank all the applicants also and remind everybody that we have many other fine committees if you are not appointed today or elected today. And I vote for Al, Dave, and Kenny Chung.
All right, and Mayor Derwin.
I have to think a little bit. Okay, I am voting for Dave Ross, Al Sill. Thank you both for stepping up again. And it was really, really, really close, but I'm voting for Kenny Chung. And I just want to say that all the applicants were fantastic.
They really were.
Yeah, really thank you all.
I think we've got to decide whether or not we are still going to allow applicants from sphere of influence to apply, or if we should keep it to Portola Valley proper, since we have so many applicants these days. We didn't used to have as many, but you were fascinating to listen to, and I thank you so much for taking your time to put in the application and to join us today. This is how we continue our long-standing commitment to volunteerism, to the practice of democracy. And it is because of people like you that we still are who we are. So Sharon, are you going to give us the results?
I've got them at my end. Al Sill received 5 votes. Dave Ross received 5 votes. Kenny Chung received 3 votes. So they will be appointed to the ASCC. And Megan Michael received 2 votes.
Okay. And I want to tell you guys, don't be discouraged. This body has a precedent of appointing people who have tried several times. For example, Jane Wilson. Her first interview had to have been one of the worst interviews I have ever heard in my entire life. And yet she picked herself up and she got back in there and she applied again. I mean, we talk about that interview, she and I, and actually Alex von Felt. It has brought us so much joy over the years. And so don't give up. If you try again, and also there's lots of committees, or if you just want to talk to us about ideas, you can reach out to any of the council members or any staff members. So thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
All right, I'm going to get back on schedule. And we're going to now, pardon me.
Through the chair, did you?
We're going to take a break. First, we're going to take
a very quick break, 5 minutes.
5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
Okay, we are back. Welcome to the second half of our special council meeting. Now we will interview planning commissioners. There are 3 open seats on the planning commission. And just to remind you, the planning commission meets on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of each month at 7 p.m. If you've been here since the beginning of the meeting, this is going to sound familiar, but I will have to explain the process to those who have not been at the meeting the entire time. Each planning commission candidate will have an opportunity to introduce themselves and explain why they're running. Council members will each ask 1 question. And after all the candidates have been interviewed, I will allow the public to comment by using the raise hand button or by physically raising their hand. The council will have a few moments to make their choices, and a voice vote will be taken by Town Clerk Sharon Hanlon. Afterwards, the appointees will be announced and I will adjourn the meeting. We are running late, so I would like to keep each interview to 15 minutes. And we aren't going to be timing it, but if I start to look really antsy, that means you need to wrap it up. All righty, our first candidate today is Christy Corley.
Hey, Christy, it's Jeremy. If you can hear me, please unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you now, and we can even see you. Thank you. Thanks for coming today, Christy. Could you tell us all a little bit about yourself and why you're running?
Honorable council members, as you've seen from my application, I have a long time volunteer for 25 years in this community. I've lived all my life in the Bay Area. I am a great, it's a great time in my life to be a volunteer. I feel I have the time, energy, and knowledge to the success of this town. During the pandemic, I've been able to do more volunteerism regarding the town issues, and I've enjoyed giving back. The reason I want to apply for the Planning Commission is I've lived in Portola Valley for 25 years. I've watched and observed the changes during this time. I feel I know the pulse of the town. I've raised my family here. I would look forward to working with others on the Planning Commission to balance the needs of this community and the beautiful rural area that we live in. We have many challenges ahead. I'm not sure if you want me to go on, but We revising the general plan, the building codes and the zoning changes are coming our way in 2021. And I want to be a part of that process, contributing my energy, my knowledge, and voice. I feel I'm an excellent researcher. I would give my careful consideration as part of the group to move forward the general plan, codes, and zoning. I know this is a 4-year volunteer commitment and I'm ready for the task. I would consult with others on the commission to make decisions. And I want to have a voice. I want to support Portola Valley, including these concerns. Enhance the vibrant open space, fire and seismic safety, affordable housing, and ensure an inclusive volunteer community. I want to be a part of that process. I respect the choices of the citizens of the town to build their dream projects. And while balancing the town's guidelines, I want to take into careful consideration the safety of the citizens in making those decisions. I will listen to other voices in the community, and I recognize that there's a diverse opinions on many issues in the town. And it's important that the Planning Commission have many points of view on the commission and be good listeners. My approach will be representing the residents, the property owners, businesses, renters, land itself and its habitat, for which this reason we all moved here. I care about wildfires, seismic issues, public safety, affordable housing, and open space. I want to ensure the inclusiveness of the volunteer community. We all have challenges ahead and updating our general plan and zoning. I'd like to be the voice for the community and rewriting the general plan with the varied interests in mind.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to start, this is the order we're going to go. Craig, Sarah, John, Jeff. So Craig, do you have a question for Christy?
I do. So I'm going to pick up on the theme that I was asking our prospective ASCC commissioners. So part of what we're going to be working on, as you mentioned, Christy, in the coming years is our new housing element under the new RHNA cycle. So how do you see us changing our processes to accommodate 4 times the amount of housing production that we've historically had to handle without breaking everything that we love about Portola Valley?
I actually think that you'd probably have to limit what you do on a yearly basis. We only have so much staff, and I think we'd have to take in and limit our applications, as some other towns and cities do.
But how could we do that and do 4 times as many as we currently do?
You might have to add a staff member to do that. I'd also like to see, trying to think, I'd like to see other areas developed as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
You're muted, Sarah.
Apologies, sorry about that. Hi, Christy. Are there elements of the town's land use code that you would like to see changed?
Okay, code. I was mainly looking at the 17-page document, the general plan. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there. Are you talking about the zoning code?
No, related to the general plan.
Okay. So I think there's a lot in the general plan that we need to redo.
So maybe let's just take a step back. Why don't you share your thoughts on what you want, what you think needs to be relooked at there as part of the update?
Well, I'd take each application independently and consider it objectively, judging it on its own merits. I'd apply these standards and it's reviewed and decided upon as you do as council members. And we're called into public service because we like to give back to our community. So those of you who know me well, I would tend to be a helper to others. So public service fits with what I value as a person.
Are there specific aspects of the general plan that you are interested in seeing updates on? You know, are there specific elements or, you know, updates that you'd like to see as part of the overall general plan updating process? Any particular areas?
I believe in inclusiveness. And I think asking the residents what they feel is important. Regarding the zoning, I think there's a lot of updates that we need to do, and I'd like to be a part of that. We haven't updated the plan since what, 2011, 2010?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. John.
Okay, hi, Christy. My question's a bit of a follow-up on Craig's question regarding the state mandates that have come down. What level do you think the involvement of the town of Portola Valley should be regarding the regional housing crisis? Do you feel we're doing enough, or should we be doing more?
I think we have to play our role in it. I think we have to be careful with the environment that we live in. We are Portola Valley, wooded area, hilly. I think that we need to repeat the question. I'm just nervous.
As regards to the Portola Valley's role in the regional housing crisis, do you feel we should be doing more or less?
I think we have to be careful in this area. I don't think that we can overbuild, and I think we need to do our part as well. So what that looks like right now is what the Planning Commission has to decide. I think there's a fine balance here. It's an environment none like other in the other 18 sections of San Mateo County. And we're very unique. We're a lot like, you know, Los Altos Hills. We're a lot like Woodside. We have to be careful what we do in building. And we have to build in the right places due to the extreme fire dangers, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have wildlife seismic issues, and we have a lot of open space, and we need affordable housing as well. So with those three things, how can we do that right? I think we have a lot of assessing to do. I'd like to represent the residents, the property owners, the businesses, the renters, the land itself, the habitat, for which reason we moved here. So we have to be careful what we do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
Hey, Christy. What would you say are sort of, if you had to think about kind of our land use guide, our land use, the general plan land use element and our guidelines, what do you think are kind of the foundation of it? What are the most fundamental things in there? And do you see those things being threatened, or do you think that they are in conflict with some of the things that are coming towards us now?
When you look at the 7 elements, if they're land use, transportation, open space, conservation, housing, and noise and safety, is that what you're talking about when you say the 7 elements of this?
I meant specifically the land use element, yes.
Land use. How can we do a better job with land use? Is that what you're asking?
I was asking, what do you think are sort of the key? What's the foundation of our land use policy? What are the important parts of it? What are the things you think are absolutely sort of the must-haves in there?
Trails, paths, roads, highways, historical areas, sustainability. We have a scenic corridor on the Alpine side. We have a scenic corridor on the Portola Road side. We have town center that we want to preserve. We've just put in a lot of money into it. We have the Napforth Triangle. There's a lot to protect here. And I think we have to keep all that in mind as we make decisions for land use. And we put a lot of money and time and energy and millions of dollars into town center, and we want to preserve that. But we also want to offer affordable housing to those in our community, such as firefighters, teachers, and people who work in our town, in town center as well. So how do we do that? How do we do that and stay fire safe?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, Christy, you alluded to this, but in the next several years, the Planning Commission is going to have to conduct public hearings on a new housing development, the RENA 6 housing element, an update to our general plan, and possibly a change to our zoning ordinance. The subject matter will be difficult, the issues will be controversial, and as planning commissioners, you are obligated to put aside your personal views and make findings based on state law and our town codes, regardless of whether or not you agree with the laws. Tell me why you think you are the best person to sit on the Planning Commission during these next 2 very trying years.
Yes, I will take each application independently and consider it objectively, judging on its own merits. We are called into public service because we like to give back to our community. I've lived here 25 years. I've been a participant 25 years, and I would like to continue, even though my children have moved on. I'd like to apply these standards as it's reviewed and decided upon, as you do as council members. So we're all called into public service because we like to give back to our community. And those of you who know me well, I tend to be a helper to others, and public service fits what I value as a person.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And thank you for interviewing with us today. We are going to move on to our next candidate.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right, John Golden.
I just moved John over, so it may take a second to kick in.
All righty.
Hi, John, welcome. You're on mute.
Mute.
There we go. Hello.
Yay. Hi, John.
Hey there, how are you?
Good afternoon. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you have decided to apply for another term? This would be your second term, correct?
That is correct, yes. Yes, about myself. Longtime Portola Valley resident, came out here in '86. Have been through lots of remodels and raising the kids out here, lots of careers and then retiring and raising the kids out here and sending them to the local schools. I used to work for Hewlett-Packard, engineering background. I have an MBA and then worked for Hewlett-Packard for many years until I retired. With respect to the Planning Commission, I've kind of enjoyed it. It was a little bit happenstance. Way back when, it was kind of the first opening that came up, and I said, you know, I need to do, there was a whole discussion around philanthropy in Silicon Valley about needing to do more locally. And I thought, that makes sense, and I had time. So the first thing that came up was the Planning Commission, and I think for me, it's turned out to be a pretty good fit in terms of sort of the analytical background, that type of thing. It's certainly been interesting. You know, there are times when it's pretty rewarding and there are times when maybe not so much. But I feel like I'd like to continue. And there's a number of projects coming along that would be good to stay involved with. I think I've learned a few things along the way from a learning curve perspective that would probably be helpful. I think that's about it.
Good. Good, thanks. Craig, do you have a question for John?
I do. Hi, John.
Hey, Craig.
I have been asking all of the applicants a variation of this question. As we enter into the next RHNA housing cycle, and the allocation of units that we're going to be required to plan for is roughly quadrupling, how do you see the process of the Planning Commission evolving in order to accommodate approximately 4 times the volume of housing production that you've been used to over the last 4 years you've been on the Planning Commission?
You know, in many ways, the Planning Commission doesn't make laws. Occasionally, you guys the town council will come to us and say, would you study this? And this is something new that needs to be changed. But that generally doesn't start with us, it starts with you. Primarily, we are evaluating against the current codes and regulations. I would expect the bulk of what comes in over the next few years associated with that housing development to fall within the latter category in terms of we're evaluating where does it fit. You know, the big issues, frankly, are going to be, do you guys want to start changing zoning to accommodate? Those are going to be the hard issues. You know, if you guys don't do anything from a town council perspective, it's going to come to me or the Planning Commission, and we're going to evaluate it based on the current regs. That could get tricky in the sense of, you know, similar to the ADUs issue that came up. It's not entirely within our control. And the state is clearly making some demands. So it wouldn't surprise me for the town council to turn around and ask the Planning Commission to investigate some of these categories. But I think that's how the process is likely to flow.
Yeah, I suppose you probably weren't intimately involved with the last RHNA cycle, but the Planning Commission is going to be extensively involved, and you're going to have many hearings, because we essentially every 8 years, the state requires us to rewrite our housing element and adjust all of the rules and regulations that are incorporated in that to accommodate the units that need to be built. So there's a lot of work ahead. Yes,
yeah. I noted the letter that you guys sent off to the commission was like, interesting. It's going to be pretty challenging. And on the other hand, some of the issues in terms of our infrastructure, you know, our whole wildfire discussion already brought that up to the fore, and probably doesn't hurt that we've got another reason to maybe address it.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Hi, John.
Hey, Sarah.
My question relates to the general plan. How do you feel about the town's plan to update the general plan in the coming years? And are there specific areas where you in particular would like to see updates?
You know what popped into my head was things that I would like to see updated, but I'm not actually sure that they're I guess they're within the purview of the general plan. One of the things I've noted that's pretty interesting is our whole change in our volunteer community. And, you know, we used to have, I think, more people volunteering. We seem to have a lot more cooperation. We seem to have entered an era where that is less true. Additionally, you know, one of the things I've seen on the Planning Commission is that historically, the applicants would come and they'd come in person. And more so now, it's a lawyer or a architect, somebody representing them, because, you know, they've probably got a working couple that are busy and maybe still at work even at the time we do the Planning Commission. So there's been an evolution, I think, and I suspect we could think about that from a, how do we manage both our committees and our town management? You know, I've seen a couple of complaints about change. I think change is kind of inevitable. It's a question of how do we manage it and move forward. You know, overall, the town document is pretty good in the sense of it is generally setting guidelines as opposed that require current interpretation versus trying to be prescriptive. And I've been involved historically with some organizations where people tried to be too prescriptive, and the problem is things change, you know. So in many ways, I like what was originally set up there, that gives us the opportunity to look at it and reinterpret over time. So I like the overall flow of the general plan.
Thank you.
All righty, John Richards.
Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Okay, let's see. I am going to ask a sort of a follow-up here with regard to our upcoming challenges with state housing requirements and RENA changes and all of that. What sort of zoning changes should we possibly consider in town? Easy one.
Yeah, so that's, you know, I suspect, you know, when all is said and done, there's a certain number of lots. And you know, in my view, given our current housing situation, those are all going to be built out over time. You know, it's just, we need the housing in the Bay Area. So I think what's really going to have to happen is, and I don't think that ends up, I've not done the math or looked at the numbers, but I'm guessing that doesn't add up to enough. If you go with single family homes, that doesn't add up to enough. So I think we're going to have to look at, you know, what is the delta? What are we looking at? And how do we accomplish that? And it probably moves away from, you know, the single family housing in order to get the numbers, which plays well also in the sense of, you know, if you do it that way, presumably you are providing some lower cost housing that then becomes more affordable, and we can think of some of the other goals in the town in terms of, you know, how do we have some of our local teachers and police and that have the ability to actually live in town, which I think would be a tremendous benefit.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Jeff?
Yeah. Hey, John.
Hey, Jeff.
So we've kind of, I mean, I think we're sort of talking about what is really, I think, the sort of defining tension of the current, this next coming years, which is sort of our traditional approach to land use versus what are, you know, becoming sort of stronger and stronger pressures from the outside, particularly from the state. Looking at just our land use element, what do you say, what would you consider sort of the fundamentals, or what would you say is sort of the non-negotiables or the things that are the bedrock of our land use that need to be preserved, you know, in the face of this?
Well, I'm going to pick one, except the problem is it's a little amorphous. You know, we always talk about the rural nature of Portola Valley. And, you know, whenever somebody has a, like either they say what they really like about Portola Valley or what they think is going wrong, usually relates to their interpretation of what does rural mean, which of course, you know, can mean a lot of things. You know, I think most rural voters voted for Trump, and I suspect we were not in that category of rural voters. You might put farms and, you know, junk on a lot as, you know, you drive up into the Sierras and you see these garbage dumps, and that's rural. I don't think people mean that. I do think they're looking for a sense of calm. You know, one of the things we were so fortunate to have here is that we're surrounded by open space and open territory. A little bit of a concern from a fire perspective now, but you know, that when you drive into Portola Valley, you feel like you're going a long way away. We're only 5 miles from the center of Stanford campus. And yet, if anybody comes into, an Uber driver comes in to pick you up, they're surprised that there's no street lights, the maps are, maybe the GPS is, oh, it's pretty good these days, but, it was an issue early on. There's the fact that, we are, with that nature of the rural, feeling a little bit more remote, trying to maintain that as best we can, I think is a key part of it. I do think in many ways too, compared to some of our neighboring communities, we have more of a sense of community. Even though I was talking, we seem to have gotten a little more contentious lately compared to say Los Altos Hills or Woodside. We are far more, I believe we're more community oriented that way, and I'd like to see that maintained.
Thank you.
Hey, John, in your first term, you have really dealt with some tough ones, some very deep issues that took a tremendous amount of analysis and many meetings. So looking back, what's one subject, one project, one issue you dealt with that you felt good about the outcome, and one where you felt like, wish it would have been a little different?
So in terms of interest, the cannabis one was the most fascinating in terms of, wow, didn't expect to have to deal with that. and sort of digging in with the police, and the fire marshal and their concerns about what does it make to grow operations and the different points of view in the community. Even though it seemed like it was overwhelmingly voted in, we certainly had some folks that were very, very, very concerned about it. I think as a commission, in terms of both writing the rules and debating it, we were pretty conservative, but still, basically saying, people have a personal individual right, and we don't want to get in the way of that. And we're willing to consider beyond that, as long as we don't get into any kind of issues which are general issues in terms of safety, or just in terms of, we're not trying to turn this into a big business development area either. So I thought, as an issue, kind of contentious and sort of interesting, that was sort of on the positive side. Although I would consider I guess more maybe on the negative side. It's not a specific project, but it's kind of an area that keeps coming up that I'm not sure we're dealing with properly, either as a planning commission or as a town, and it's the whole noise ordinance area. We have a specific noise ordinance, and you can measure and test it, and that's about it. And yet, we do get people complaining, and I suspect we get enough complaints that maybe, the actual rule isn't quite enough. Now we have the ability to, add more restrictions on that. I'm specifically thinking, I guess in the back of my mind, we had the issue of the horse lot next to the town center, and they gave part of it to the town, and they were adding more horses there, and we were looking at their CUP. And the neighbors uphill, kind of across the street and uphill, have a history of being concerned about the noise. Some of it makes me wonder if some of it is more justified than we've been able to deal with. We haven't been able to quantify it enough. So I'm a little disappointed in that, in terms of how we haven't really been able to get a better handle on that, in terms of our things. And, I guess that would be the one where I'm kind of going, I'm not sure we've done that one right.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you, John. Thanks for reapplying. Thanks for interviewing with us this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Our next applicant is Ann Quaff-Sill.
And she's just coming in right now.
All right.
Just seems to be taking a second to connect, Marianne.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay. There we go. Anne, can you hear me? It's Jeremy.
Hello, yes, I can. Oops,
All right.
sorry, the sun is behind me. Just a minute. Wow, that's bad. Our house got filled up with people trying to do calls, so I got relegated to somewhere I don't usually work. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, good afternoon, Anne. We can see you very well now.
Okay, good.
Can you tell us, maybe you could tell us a little about yourself for those who don't know you and why you've decided to reapply. This will be your second term, correct? That's no, right. You've only done 2 years, correct?
Only 2 years, I guess a partial term, yes.
You picked up, yeah, okay. All righty.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, I've lived in Portola Valley 31 years, I think. I just love the ambiance of it and the way it looks and the rural character and the kind of small town feel. I worked in the biotech industry for most of that time. And I recently, I guess you'd say retired, although at the time I called it gap year after 60 because I wasn't ready to say I was retired last November, but then COVID kind of pushed it. So I've been doing just fun things now, but I really like the Planning Commission. I like the kind of work we do and the kind of decisions, and the thought process is good for me, thinking about complex topics, but then how they, you know, we're going to word it so that it can live for many, many years, makes sense. So I would definitely be interested in doing it longer. I feel like 2 years, you kind of just start to know a lot of the issues. So could make use of some of that knowledge for a longer period of time.
Thank you. Craig, do you have a question for Anne?
I do, Anne. Hi. I've been asking all the applicants a very similar question. What I'd like to hear your views on is how you expect the Planning Commission is going to adapt in the upcoming new housing element cycle as our RHNA allocation numbers percolate through to us. And it's looking like we're going to have to accommodate and plan for approximately 4 times the volume of housing that we've been producing historically for the current 8-year cycle, which is ongoing. So how do you, looking ahead to the changes we're going to have to make, both to the rules and to our processes and how the commission operates and so on, do you have any thoughts on how you expect that will play out and how we'll need to adapt to be able to satisfy those requirements?
Wow, no, I think probably like most people, the numbers seem quite daunting, aggressive, and hard for not just Portola Valley, but almost any municipality to meet. So no, I don't have a magic bullet for what the set of solutions are. I think the work we did earlier on liberalizing the ADU policies, things like that, and specifically on ADUs, but other things would make sense and help to make it kind of more liberal. You know, I'm interested in finding solutions to it and ways to, if not get to the state's number, at least, you know, march up the way to try or to get closer. I know there's, I definitely heard when we were talking about the ADUs, some residents came and asked us to, you know, fight the state on it. That's not my starting point. Mine would be to more think how we could accommodate it. The ADU thing and the kind of little bit higher density housing projects are the things on the table that make sense to me.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Sarah.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Sarah.
How do you feel about the town's plan to update the general plan? And are there any specific areas where you would like to, or where you feel that we need specific areas where you specifically feel like we need updates?
Oh, no, I am always in favor of updating things. I think kind of living documents make more sense, and you can't expect documents from many decades ago to address some of the topics that are current now. So I'm in favor of it, but no, I haven't studied it lately to have an opinion about which topics I would feel need updating.
Thank you.
John Richards.
Hi, Anne. Hi, John. So it's a bit of a follow-up on Craig's question. Do you feel that we're at a point where we need to consider some zoning changes, specifically for housing issues, but even potentially for commercial zoning changes?
Oh, I would be open to that. I hadn't thought through it. Did we need to make zoning changes? But I definitely think that should be on the table. I don't think there's, you know, any true magic to the zoning that was done at first or in the past. I think, you know, people like the way the town is and like things about it, but I think zoning should definitely be a tool that should be considered.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff.
Thank you. Hey, Anne.
Hey, Jeff.
So a lot of these questions that we're asking are sort of, they have to do with just sort of, you know, the tension between how we've done things in the past and what we're being asked to do in the future. I guess my question is, and I was thinking originally about the land use element, but I think it applies to the entire general plan. You know, what do you think are things in there that are sort of either important and that we just have to preserve at all costs, or things that you think are actually maybe outdated or we need to reconsider as sort of, you know, pressures from the outside and to some extent from the inside come towards us?
That's a great question for all of us and everybody in town, huh? I definitely feel like I really wouldn't want to change the rural character, the idea that we stick with native plants, that things are very dark. I feel like when I look at other neighborhoods that, you know, ostensibly have our topography, like Los Altos Hills or something, what I love about Portola Valley is that feel. I feel less strongly about the number of houses or the density of houses. I think that can be done in a way that feels good and, you know, isn't just some monster thing right as you drive in. You know, of course, we all care about traffic and fire safety is big, but I think I would consider density changes over darkness and kind of rural plants and preserving the topography, you know, not letting people just chop off hills so they get a better view, things like that.
Thank you.
Okay, Anne, you've only served for 2 years, but those have been some heavy duty years. And what's one issue that you worked through on the Planning Commission that you feel good about? And maybe one that left you feeling frustrated?
You know, if I could maybe even pick the same thing, I think we did good work on the ADU proposal. It was a lot of content to think through and a lot of input from people. And that's good. And I think we came up with the council modifications that made sense and are good. I have put thought into it, and I wish there was a way to make the process more kind of efficient. And I know my kind of just general demeanor, and as many of you and people in town come from the startup world, I'm kind of like, yeah, let's collect the information, put it all together, see what's important, make a decision, you know, go to the next thing. And government's not like that, you know. An important tenet is to get input from everybody, and I really appreciate that, and I want to hear from everybody. but I did feel like, I think we had 8 meetings and many of them went from 7 to 11. I do feel like it's kind of disenfranchises residents after a while when it takes so much time and the meetings go so long. I felt like sometimes we got to the important thing, you know, the thing that people would have come to the meeting for, but we didn't get to it till 10:30, so everybody's gone. You know, it kind of the public doesn't get to participate when things are longer. So I think through how could we do that more efficiently or in the future. My only idea is to not make it regular meetings, but set aside like a Saturday and say it's going to be from 1 to 5, or let it kind of be known it's going to be a long meeting. People could at least come and go or come for later parts. You know, the trouble with this, as you all know too, but a 7 o'clock meeting that just goes and goes, people just leave, right? Nobody arrives later. Whereas I think if it was like 1 to 5 on a Saturday, at least some people would arrive at 3:30 because they were busy earlier. So you'd still have at least some public there. So I debate about this. How can we continue to get input from everybody, the public? That's important. But, you know, prevent it. A lot of it ended up being repetitive because, you know, every meeting kind of has a little background section and we'd repeat that. Things got repeated too much, I thought. So I wish we could do that better.
Thanks. I was just thinking when I first went on the council, we started at 8 o'clock and the meetings went really late. And I remember watching the clock and there would be a certain time, seems like sometime after 11. And I would say, now begins the stupid hour, because the council members would really start to degrade the thinking, the behavior. So I hear you. It's tough. All righty. Thanks. Thanks for coming this afternoon.
Oh,
thank you, Ann.
Welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Our next candidate is Andre, and I'm not certain how to pronounce the last name.
Reich.
Reich. Andre Reich.
Oh, there's Andre.
Andre, if you can hear me, if you could unmute at your end. You're there. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Can you see me? All right.
Yes. Good afternoon, Andre.
Thanks. Good afternoon.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are applying for the Planning Commission?
Sure. I've lived in the town for 12 or 13 years. I think it was 08 we got here. I have a long history of building and financing residential houses, including a couple of my own and my parents. And I just, you know, my kids are almost grown up and I'm semi-retired with doing a lot of real estate management, basically. And so I have the time and the energy to commit to the town, and I sort of want to see it flourish in a, you know, a compassionate but yet competent fashion. I've been around, built a few things I know that, you know, the town used to look like in the 60s with a lot of T111 siding and horse barns. And then it sort of went through the transitional phase with the California ranches like I have now, which we've, you know, made it more modern, but, and then we're on to a different phase now. So I just want to give back, and felt like we've really enjoyed our time here. I've had 5 kids through all the schools, and I have some expertise in the area, pretty sharp on reading rules and stuff too. So, and we've gone through the planning process here twice and had pretty good, you know, good relations with everyone. So I think I have expertise and talent and time and effort and energy to do it. So no, I'm not really experienced in governmental, you know, processes other than being on the public end of it. So and I don't have any masters in city planning or anything like that, but I've worked a lot with planners and, you know, say ASCC and those things. So really it's more of a desire to give back a little bit to the town, which we've enjoyed a lot.
Okay, thank you. Greg, do you have a question for Andre?
I do. Hi, Andre. Nice to meet you. My questions for all of the applicants have focused on kind of the coming 4 years of what this planning commission term would be. One of the big projects and things that the commission is going to be tasked with working through is figuring out how to plan over the course of the next 8-year housing cycle, which is a mandate from the state. So we're in a current cycle that ends in 2021, and then the new cycle starts after that, 2022, the new cycle starts after that. Okay. In the coming 8-year cycle, over the course of that cycle, we're going to have to plan for 250 housing units or thereabouts to be built in Portola Valley, which is about 4 times the historic pace that we've faced. So how do you see adapting the way that the town works to handle that dramatic increase of housing production without breaking what we all love about the town?
Yeah, well, I don't have any insight into the budgeting process, but the easy way would be to just throw bodies at it, of course, but I think that's not going to work here, and I wouldn't really prefer that. It's going to have to come through a really good and specific set of guidelines and rules, I would think, and the more clear they are, the less room for interpretation, I suppose, and there's less time involved in trying to mediate all those things. That would seem to me to be the #1 priority. But you have to do that in a thoughtful way, and it's not always easy to, you know, to peer into that crystal ball as to know what problems you're going to have. Then you always have the, you know, the rule of unintended consequences to deal with too. So I would say the best planning you can get early on, but you might need to combine that with a sort of nimble-footed approach to adjusting things when we see if any major issues come up. That's going to require more time, I imagine, from the ASCC and planning board members than they would have to have done in the years past, I would imagine. Fortunately, I have the time, and I'm willing to put that effort in. I don't know, what do you think is going to be required other than, you know, I don't want to increase any budgets anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very complicated. There's a number of things from, you know, figuring out how our infrastructure will support the units, where they should go, types of units, how concentrated, you know, ADUs versus multi-unit project and so on. And so that's what we need to figure out over the course of the next 2-ish years, is how to ask through all of those things and come up with a plan that the state will accept.
Yeah, well, we built an ADU here just last 3 years ago. I'm in it right now, but I understand that. I think by the current or the future rules, this one might not be big enough, right? It was as big as it could be, but to I suppose, accommodate the number of people the state wants, we're probably going to have to adjust those types of things, sizes and positions and setbacks. Even don't want to really touch setbacks if we don't have to. But whatever is required, I suppose we're going to have to do in a creative fashion, but still bearing in mind that what the consequences of these might be. And that's tough to do. But more thought you can put into it, the better, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Sarah?
Hi, Andre.
Hi.
I am not sure how aware or not you might be that the town is planning some updates to the general plan over the coming years. And just kind of curious what your thoughts are. How do you feel about that? And if there's any specific areas where you feel like updates are helpful.
Well, I know it has to be done on a periodic basis. So I would imagine now's a good time, especially with the pressure being put on by the state. So I don't know, it just seems that I've never had a big problem going through planning here. So other people have said they have, but I think that might be more akin to the homeowners associations things that they've had to go through. Like, so I'm not in Westridge, so we've just only had to deal with the town. And I don't think the planning is that far off. You know, issues I've had is just with, can I have my white windows or not? And I don't think that's a huge issue for anybody really. Other thing would be for slope density, maybe. It's gonna be hard for people to get enough square footage on steeper lots. It's always been that way. And if we have to put more housing in, that might be something we need to look at. Although it is expensive to build steeply, it's maybe the only way to go. And I'm blessed with a flat lot here in Shawnee Pass. So we got to put in 90% of the allowable square footage, but a lot of people with higher slopes may get only 60, 70, 80%. So that's one thing to look at. I'm not suggesting we need to change it, but it's one way to go about possibly getting some more square footage, or, you know, at least to somehow address the number of units that need to be put in. I haven't had a big problem with the plan as it is now, but you know, I know it's a periodic thing that we have to do, and I'm okay with doing it. I don't know. Do you have any issues that you think should be addressed that would affect how you think about it?
Well, I have some thoughts, but today we're interviewing you, so.
I don't know. So
thank you.
Whenever I interview, I like to ask questions too, to get an idea of what, you know, where people are coming from. So I hope that's not impolite to ask.
No. Thank you for your answer though.
Okay.
Okay, John.
Okay, hi, Andre.
Hi.
So this is the same basic area of questioning, I guess, that we're all talking about how to address the upcoming difficulties with our town housing element. So my question is more to the point of whether or not what the town has been doing is enough to address the regional housing crisis, or if we should be doing more, or do you feel that we should be doing less even?
Well, I don't know that we could do less. It'd be great if there were no outside constraints and we could do whatever we wanted to do, but that is not the case. And so therefore, we pretty much have to deal with it. I'm not happy about being told what to do as a town, but it is what it is. I mean, I hate that expression, by the way, but but things being what they may, or any other creative way of saying that, I think it's just going to require rolling up our sleeves and really getting into it, so we can do it in the best way that really. I would like to keep the town presence, or its character. I wouldn't want to change it too much. We need to accommodate these things in ways that, I'm not opposed to change. Anybody who's opposed to change is going to die unhappy, right? There is change, there always will be. But if we could just do it in a way that is, and I know we can with enough effort and thought, do it in ways that really keep in with the town's character and aesthetic. The aesthetic's important, but I think more about intention and where people want to be with their lives. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, because maybe I'm rambling, but I just think with a lot of hard work and understanding and effort, reaching out to people, I think it can be done. We don't have any choice as far as that goes. I wish we did.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, Andre.
Hi.
I have a kind of more general question. We're talking a lot here about kind of the past versus the future.
Okay.
You know, we're obviously clearly things we're being asked to do things that are not how we've done them in the past. And we're talking about housing, but it could apply to really any part of our general plan or anything that we're doing in town. I'm just curious, is there anything of the things that you've seen and how things are done here have been handled here over the years? Is there anything you see that sort of you think is a non-negotiable that has to stay the way it is? Is there anything you think that we're doing that we could be doing differently? I mean, you talked about we need to embrace some change. Are there, are there things that you either would or wouldn't change in our general policies?
Well, I don't see anything that's set in stone. On the other hand, I'm not a big proponent of changing things we don't need to change. I'm not saying that certain rules were no good and we need to get rid of them. I don't see that as a problem. I think it's more how we're going to deal with outside pressures and without making, look, some changes for the best. We just don't always know which ones they're going to be for the best. And, so no, I don't have any set in stone issues as far as what's been done in the past. As long as we go forward in the future in a thoughtful way, I think we can do this with the least amount of disruption. That's what I think was really a good goal.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Andre. I think it's pretty clear that the coming years on the Planning Commission are going to be really hard ones.
Yes.
They have to deal with the Stanford Wedge project. They have to deal with this housing element, the RENA numbers. They have to deal with the update of the general plan. I mean, or even smaller ones like the Neely Winery tasting room. Everything is just fraught with controversy and people, neighbors in town who are unhappy, long meetings, people who will be mad at you no matter what you do. Okay. And you're still into this. You still want to do this.
Sure. Life is hard, right? And it's often not rewarding when it's not hard. So I don't have a problem with that. Went through college, got a master's, did all this, started several businesses, and all of those take a lot of work. I'm married, so I'm used to people yelling at me. No, I love my wife, we're doing great, but I have no issue. I think, let's just say tough skin is one of my qualities. Try to be disagreeing in a polite way is a good thing. Or I think I can handle the barrage, if you want to call it that. I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't have a problem with hard work. I think that's the more the better, really. And I've got the time to do it, which has not been the case in years past. So I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for interviewing with us.
Okay.
Thank you for applying.
Okay, thank you all.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Okay, our fifth applicant is Craig Taylor.
And he's just joining now. Craig Taylor, that is. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great.
Hi, Craig.
Hi.
We can't see you, but we can hear you. Is that your intent?
Not on purpose. Hang on. Let's see. How about now?
There you are.
Now we can see you.
Excellent.
Good afternoon. Thanks for showing up and applying again. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, those of us who are in the Zoom meeting who don't know you, and why you have decided to apply for another term?
Okay. So I'm Craig Taylor. And first of all, let me just say congratulations to Jeff and Sarah for your recent election.
Thank you.
So I'm Craig Taylor. I've been a volunteer in the town for probably over 25 years. I'm on the Emergency Preparedness Committee and the Open Space Committee. And then obviously I've been doing the Planning Commission for the last, I guess, 2.5 years, finishing off the term. So I think that's a thumbnail sketch of my background. I mean, right now I'm doing major construction in my house and a bunch of other stuff, but probably not as relevant. Do you want more detail than that, or is that kind of give people a rough idea?
That's great. And why do you want to do another 4 years?
So I think we've got a lot of interesting issues. I mean, obviously it's interesting times with COVID, but what's coming up in front of the Planning Commission in the next year or two, there's a lot of important stuff. We've got the general plan coming up. We've got the housing element coming up. I see all those as pretty critical, and I've basically, apply because I would like to help shape those things and, provide the council sort of the best sort of data gathering, because I kind of see that that's what the Planning Commission does in large part, is we kind of gather data and distill it so that the town council can actually make final decisions and have kind of all the information clearly in front of them.
Okay. Yes, we appreciate that.
Yeah, we try our best.
Okay. Craig Hughes, do you have a question for Craig Taylor?
I do. Hello, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
My question is around the upcoming housing element regular update cycle. As we get our updated numbers from RHNA and the state as to the number of housing units we need to plan for to be built in town.
Yep.
And it's looking like that number will be about 4 times higher than our current cycle. I was wondering what thoughts you have around how the Planning Commission, how our entire planning system really can adapt to the requirement to produce housing units at about 4 times the rate that we currently or historically have been, without breaking Portola Valley and what we all love about this town.
Sure. Well, obviously it's a challenge. I mean, I think we've been starting to look at this issue. I think the general goal of RHNA is a powerful one. I think having balanced communities is important. So I think that's the good thing. I think sometimes people get a little bit too much NIMBY and not in my backyard. And I hope that we can sort of balance that out. That said, the amount of housing that RHNA may ask of is a lot. Obviously, in this last year, we worked on the ADU ordinance. I think there's probably more we can do to encourage ADUs, maybe even subsidize ADUs as a way of bringing some of the housing into the town. The tough part is doing it without being disruptive. I mean, the idea, for instance, of having no zoning, right? Just abolishing all residential zoning and allow people to build whatever they want, which is sort of the Houston model, I see as a disaster. So, I mean, I do really think it's important that we stay on top of it. So I think, there are a variety of things that we can look at. I mean, obviously some of it is we could push back. I mean, that's certainly one thing that we heard people suggest is that, we push back on the whole concept. I don't know if that's the right one. Maybe it slows down the process some. Like I said, I think we've got ADUs. I think we have things like the Stanford Wedge where we can build additional housing. So, I mean, I think those are things we can do. We could also potentially fund housing closer to transit. Because, one thing, I'm all for balanced communities, but I also think building some of the kind of housing where people could, in theory, live here but not work here kind of seems like the wrong model. So I think trying to find that balance is going to be a challenge, but I think there's stuff that we can do.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded.
Hey, Craig. In your opening remarks, you mentioned another big project on the docket is updates to the general plan. So I'm wondering on that subject, if you could just share your thoughts about those plans and specifically if there's any particular areas where you feel like updates are required.
Well, the housing element's part of it, so that's obviously a piece. So I think when we look at the general plan, I mean, one of the feedbacks that that sort of come back is there are parts of the general plan that are kind of vague, and and maybe need to sort of be tuned up so that they're a little bit more specific. On the other hand, the thing I love about our general plan is I love the idea that the build environment is sort of subservient to the natural environment. I mean, I see that as kind of critical. And so I think as we sort of look at our general plan and we look at what we might need to do to tighten it up, make corrections where needed, I think it's important that we keep that in mind. So I think from my point of view, the most important thing is that we don't lose the essence of Portola Valley as we kind of look at the general plan and kind of what it needs.
Thank you.
Okay, John.
Yeah, Craig, hey. You mentioned no zoning. Do you feel there's a space for some zoning changes in Portola Valley?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't mean to make that imply that we are locked into the zoning we have. In some ways, we have some odd zoning as well. I mean, we have some odd zone, you know, sort of down by across from the town center. Some of the zoning in that area is quite interesting and probably could be cleaned up a little bit. Obviously, when the houses were kind of going in along with the Holiday store, I mean, that whole thing of trying to understand the different, you know, floor area in that area versus other areas. So there's definitely some room to clean some stuff up. I just think the important thing is that we find something that I think is community sort of consensus based, that we find a way for people to kind of come together. And then we don't have zoning that's so open-ended that you can impact your neighbor in a really negative way. And I think that's, in my mind, I mean, that's a big part of what zoning is for, is to make sure that what you put in place is sort of harmonious with the general plan, but also with your neighbors and just sort of the general feel of the town that we live in.
Great. Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, Craig.
Hey.
As we talk about the general plan update and sort of including particularly the housing element, we're talking a lot about just sort of past versus future. And you actually touched on this sort of, you know, the essence of Portola Valley and what's important. And I guess my question is in looking at, you know, any of these changes, whether it's the housing element or other parts of the general plan that are being updated, you know, what are things that are, what is the essence of Portola Valley, and what are things in there that maybe are not the essence? Are there things that you think are non-negotiables that we just can't ever touch, and there are things in there you think that are ready to be updated?
Well, I'd say so staying on the positive side of things I think that we need to update, fire safety is a big one that I think is kind of cross-cutting when we look at this. So I haven't, since the general plan hasn't come to the Planning Commission, I haven't actually, you know, started to look at this in detail. But clearly, fire safety is something that we're going to have to look at and think about. And then we've talked about the housing, so I won't keep going through that. But obviously, that's a piece that we need to figure out how to integrate in. But like this sort of notion, putting nature first. I mean, obviously, I've been in the Open Space Committee forever. I see that's critical. I see that is sort of the essence of Portola Valley, that we live in a beautiful place. And then the last thing is, I mean, no offense to Woodside, but, you know, I compare Portola Valley to Woodside, and the level of community involvement and volunteerism here is, I think, much higher. And I think that is a powerful thing. And one thing I'd hate to do is create a process that becomes really divisive, that we end up sort of ripping up the community over this stuff. So finding a process that balances the various needs. And I understand, particularly you guys on the council, I mean, you've had some pretty contentious council meetings. But I still think that public input, you know, like we had a discussion at the Planning Commission about whether we would limit people's comments and stuff. And we hadn't run into the stuff you guys ran into. So we said, we're going to wait and continue to let people speak. And I think that that's an important part of the Planning Commission's role, is to give people a place to speak. So that it's not just coming to the council where tonight we're making a final decision and people feel like, you know, it's do or die, and, you know, they're going to sort of die on their hill, so to speak. The Planning Commission, I think, gives people a place to have the discussion a little bit more openly. And I think that that's an important thing. So I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but those are the things that I see that are important to me.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Craig, in the last 4 years, you've worked on a lot of ordinances, issues, subjects. What's an example of one that you felt good about at the end and one where you felt maybe a little let down or frustrated?
So I thought the ADU work that we did was good. You know, we went through a lot of iterations on that, and you know, it was a long process. But I think in the end, I think we came up with some good stuff. I'd say that the marijuana ordinance, I applaud us for taking it on and not doing what most towns did, which is basically just say, nope, you can't do any of that here. We actually tried to do something. Right. I think the results that we did, I don't know, it left me feeling like, wow, this is kind of something that nobody's ever going to deal with because, you know, the hurdles are so high. But so that's just what we did do is we left the door open to say, well, if people apply, we can look and try to understand if we've kind of created, you know, a set of hurdles that are impossible to get over, then maybe we can review this. And the reality is we really just haven't had many applications. Right. But I think that was the thing that, I don't know if frustrated is quite the right word, but I wouldn't have said it was a great success in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for interviewing with us this afternoon. Thanks for replying.
Well, thank you all for taking the time and thank you all for all your service.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, our sixth and final applicant is Helen Walter.
She just joined.
Yep, I see her.
Hi.
Hi, Helen.
Hello. Nice to see you.
That's a very nice background you have there.
Thank you. It's amazing what you can find online.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you have decided to apply to the Planning Commission?
So I actually grew up in Portola Valley, not as long as John Richards. But we moved here when I was 13. And so I've been in the Bay Area for a long time and then lived elsewhere on the peninsula, you know, left for college and such, but came back and have been back in Portola Valley for about 5 years now. And I'm excited about the possibilities of what can happen in this area. We live, you know, we are part of an amazing region. And I just think that there are some great possibilities with what can happen with the town. And so I decided to apply to the Planning Commission. I know with the new RHNA numbers that we are going to we'll need to make some changes to our housing element and to the general plan. And I think that we could do some great things here. So, you know, I love Portola Valley. I love the natural characteristics of the area. And how do we make it better? So I've applied.
Okay, thanks. Craig, do you have a question for Helen?
Yes, you gave me a really nice lead into my question there, Helen. My question is, do you have any thoughts on what some of those things are that we might do? In what ways might we adapt our general plan and our process and how the Planning Commission works and all of those things in order to accommodate, you know, a 4x-ish increase in the number of housing units we need to produce relative to what we've been doing?
Right. So I actually ran some numbers last week when I saw that the road remnant parcel was on the agenda. You know, my background actually started in parks, and I started out on the Parks and Rec Commission in the city of Mountain View, and the national recreation standard is 10 acres per 1,000 residents, and we have city of Mountain View had 3 acres per 1,000 residents. Palo Alto and Sunnyvale increased it to 5 acres. So when a developer comes in, what they can do with that, right? So we we have so I ran some numbers. I just used the Hawthorne parcel in Windy Hill because I don't have all of the data on the open space that we have in Portola Valley. And, but we, town of Portola Valley, we're so rich in natural resources. We're at 300 acres per 1,000 residents. So, we have this huge wealth of natural resources, but we, regionally, to balance that out, we need to share, we need to carry some of the weight. I personally believe, others won't. To carry that weight for like housing amenities. Would that potentially mean commercial amenities? How do we create, like COVID is really, how do we make it so that we can drive less, so that we produce less greenhouse gases and allow people to live and work in town, as well as, all the people who work here who can't afford to live here. So how do we create those opportunities? Right now we have 3 parcels that are zoned multifamily. We've got the Stanford Wedge, we've got the Priory, and we've got Sequoias. The state is looking at creating, more units per acre, and how are we going to make that work for the town? So I actually think that we can carry more density and still retain our rustic nature. Others don't always believe that, but I strongly believe that. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I think it gives me a good sense of how you'd approach the issues.
Sarah? Oh, mute.
Hi, Helen. I'm going to pivot mine a little bit because your answer kind of touched on some of the questions I was going to ask. So I'll circle back and kind of go back to the land use foundations in Portola Valley, and what things do you think are most important, and what do you value the most about those?
Our natural resource wealth is, and that rural character that is in our founding documents is crucial to retaining that character. I strongly believe that we can do that though. Like, when people go up to North Star, for instance, those are apartments that people stay at, in the around the North Star. And what I realized is actually Vail, which is, you think, resorts, but they create these walkable communities that are rural in nature, right? And you think of them as being rural, but yet they also were they were the master developer for the Denver Union Station in Denver. And and they created a living room for Denver, which is such a neat urban creation. And I keep wondering, like, we have, town center, which is great, but I think there are other areas in town, like around Roberts. Could we create a commercial and live work type areas? Of course, it's private property. So, but if we change the zoning there, like what could happen there to create some really, on the Alpine Corridor, some really neat live work, walkable type zoning permissions that people might be incentivized to build something that could help us reach the rate of numbers that we need to reach that. So.
Thank you.
Right. John.
Hi, Helen. So you answered my question too, but I'll ask you another one. What do you feel about using existing open space funds for maintenance in addition to potential uses of purchase of land? So for our existing open spaces, should we be able to use our existing open spaces funds for maintenance as well as new purchases?
We can't hear you.
Oh, Helen, we can't hear you.
You're not muted. I don't know why.
What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on?
Can't hear you.
It doesn't look like
a question.
Yeah.
Helen, if it's helpful, maybe try calling in on the cell number, and you can stay on the camera.
Should we put in the chat box what the number is to call in? Yeah. Does somebody have that?
Chat's not enabled.
Oh, chat is disabled. Maybe somebody could read her the number.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay, hold on, Helen. It looks like you can hear us. So,
Helen, it is 669 900 6833.
And then you'll need the meeting ID and password, I think, as well after that, Jeremy.
Yeah. Just nod your head when you're ready for the information. Okay. The meeting ID is 974 4347 0397. And the passcode is 059. Oops, sorry. The passcode is 059844. You pop up here, I'll let you out of the waiting room. All right, there you go. That should work, Helen.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, we can.
Okay, that was weird. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you remember that question I asked you?
You asked me about maintenance and general funds, is that right?
Right. Well, no, we have existing open space funds, and there has been some talk about using some of those funds for maintenance on existing open space properties.
Okay. So maintenance, I'm sorry, so maintenance and operations is always the challenge when you're dealing with open space properties, right? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Anytime that you have a park open space, how does one pay for it? It costs cities everywhere a ton of money. I think that what funds to use would definitely depend on how they were budgeted and allocated, and like were they in a bucket for that you can't touch? Like, I haven't actually looked at the budget well enough to know whether we could touch them or not. And I thought that it was city council that would decide the overall budget and not planning commission. So I'm not that familiar with that aspect. And trying to pay for open space is always challenging, and how, I know that other cities in development fees, they will charge in lieu fees, for instance, and then those in lieu fees can be used for maintenance. So that is something that we currently don't have in the town of Portola Valley, for development fees. Usually it's done on, under the Quimby Act, it's 50 units or larger, which I don't see happening here anyway. So that's a tricky one for the town.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff.
Thanks. Hey, Helen. So a lot of what we're talking about, whether it's housing or fire or other, updates to the general plan or other ordinances, just has to do with past versus future. And clearly we're going through some, there's a lot of just transitions that we are or will be going through, probably always have been. I'm just curious, as you think about, some of the changes that would come through planning in the next few years, are there sort of elements, are there things, somebody else said, is there an essence of Portola Valley? Are there things in our general plan or that you think are sort of non-negotiables that we just can't touch? Are there things that are in there that you think are ready to be sort of revisited or revised even? Just anything, just in general, like how do you see the sort of, what do you see as making progress?
And the way our system is set up, because, our governance structure is supposed to be incremental, and because we have a decentralized, fragmented system. And so, right. And I personally am not sure that we necessarily need single family residential zoning any longer. I know that it almost passed in the legislature last year. I think that that is in the pipeline. I would be surprised if we don't see that in the next 5 years. And then how would you maintain our rural character while allowing multiple units within the parcel? I personally think, you know, if an envelope is 5,000 square feet, for instance, on a parcel that you're allowed to build 5,000 square feet, why not be able to build 4 or 5 units so that we get more density? You know, the single family residential zoning was implemented by the Supreme Court, and it's, you know, and there's some inequity, not some, there, you know, historically, you know, the zoning has been pretty historically inequitable. So, so to create more equity as well and more opportunities, and to reach our RHNA numbers, I would say that we would, you know, how to bring that, to allow that in a positive manner, and how to allow so that we don't have just single family homes, but have more of a mixture of housing types over the long run, because, you know, to reach, you know, the RHNA numbers, which is going to be challenging. But
thank you. No,
okay,
that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Helen. Last question. I guess I just would like you to tell us what experience, what personal characteristics, what values make you a good candidate for serving on a body that will vet some of the weightiest, most controversial land use issues in recent history in the next several years. Why are you that person?
You know, that's a good question. And I'll be really honest, because when I applied, I had a job with Mid-Penn Housing. And I wanted to bring this up because, so that full disclosure, so I have now lost my job Friday because of COVID. So because of the funding situation for affordable housing, I am unemployed as of Friday. So, but I think that I am good because I have a lot of experience with different aspects that I think would serve the town well. I know and I love natural resources, and I want to retain that character. I also have been trying to build an ADU for 5 years. And I can speak to that aspect and what, you know, and the headaches that has brought into my life. I can also now, I have now worked in affordable housing and seen how, with a private developer as well, because we were trying to do a triple P in Burlingame on the peninsula, Mills Peninsula land, so on public land. So I've actually seen the pro formas. I've seen the, how to create a triple P or not in some cases, but what it takes to create public-private partnerships. So I've got a lot of experience, not as of different aspects that I think would serve the town really well. Will it be controversial? Yeah, people don't like change, and I get that. But I also, I've served for the city of Mountain View, and I look at data a lot to make decisions. You know, I think when people hear that there's 300 acres per 1,000 and we're really rich that way, we want to retain that, but how can, what kind of numbers, but we're short housing, and that creates greenhouse gases. So I think that I use data a lot to found my decisions, to base my decisions, and I would explain my decisions to people.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Helen, for coming
Thank you.
And joining us today. Sorry you had a little technical challenge, but
oh no, thanks. You guys worked around it.
Well.
Thank you guys for what you guys do for the town. So I appreciate all of you too.
Okay.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. Do I sign off?
You can stay or you can go.
It's up to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So I can now take, I'm looking at participants, I can take a few very short comments from the public if the public would like to comment. If you can't raise your hand on the button, you can turn on your camera and raise your real hand. Jeremy, are you seeing any hands raised? I am not.
No, I see no hands raised.
All right. Okay, then I will bring it back to the council. We are now tasked with choosing 3 planning commissioners. It's a tough choice. Again, we have very, very good candidates, but that is our job. So we all need to choose 3 candidates and write their names down. And then when Sharon calls on us, state the 3 candidates we are wishing to appoint. So tell me, I'll give you a few minutes. Is someone not ready? John's not ready.
No, I'm ready.
I keep saying it's ready, yeah.
Everyone's ready?
I guess I'm ready as I'm going to be, yeah.
Sharon, roll call.
Councilmember Alves?
Well, I will just, I'll echo Mary Ann's thanks to everyone for interviewing. You guys gave us a lot to think about here. It was several good conversations. I am going to vote for, I will vote to keep our 3 incumbents, John Goulden, Ann Kopsil, and Craig Taylor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Warnikoff.
I'm voting for Ann, Craig, and John.
Okay. Councilmember Richards.
Yes, I would like to vote for 4, but I'll vote for 3, or even 5. Vote for John Goulden, Ann Kopsil, and Craig Taylor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hughes.
I would also vote for John, Ann, and Craig, and I would thank the other applicants for participating. I think all of you have great things that you are offering to the town of Portola Valley, and I'm sad we can't appoint more of you, but that doesn't mean that you can't take part in the processes and proceedings that the Planning Commission carries out. Their meetings are open to the public, and if you have time and inclination to participate in those, we'd more than welcome you.
Thank you. Mayor Derwin.
I'm voting for John Goulden, Ann Kopsil, and Craig Taylor. And I just wanted to make one comment. It's very difficult not to reappoint incumbents who have only served two or 4 years, who have done a very good job under very trying circumstances. Believe me, I really wanted to appoint a few other people, but okay, Sharon, will you officially announce the people who we will appoint?
So the council reappointed incumbents John Goulden, Ann Kopsil, and Craig Taylor.
Okay, I would like to congratulate John, Ann, and Craig. And as Craig Hughes said, we would like to thank everyone who stepped up, who played a part in democracy, who played a part in our long-standing tradition of volunteerism. We want to encourage you to maybe try again in a few years, look at committees, reach out to us. I think we will be forming ad hoc committees in the next few years to deal with the general plan update, probably to deal with the housing element. And I could see anybody here in this group applying for those ad hoc committees. And I guess I would like to encourage everyone to enjoy your winter solitude on the trails and paths over the holiday season, to take pleasure in small gestures of kindness, and to take good care of yourselves. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.